Okay. A few more coming in, so I'll wait just a second. Okay. All right. I'm Matt Burns. I'm from the University of Missouri, and I am really happy to be here. I talked about last time how much I love your wonderful state, and I wish I was there in person. And I'm sad that I'm not, but I really welcome this chance to be able to talk with you today, and have a conversation about helping kids with dyslexia and reading problems. It's been a real area of interest of mine for quite some time, and it's probably still the area I do the most research with, and still help kids, in schools who are struggling with severe reading problems. Let's start by, let's have you do this. All right, let me start with this. All right, I'm gonna put this over here. Now, like I said, I'll leave the chat box open. So if you have a question as we're going or something like that, I'll ask you to respond to some questions. Just go ahead and throw it in the chat box. Okay. Oops, a couple more people coming in. Actually, let me make a couple of you a host so you can let people in. So if I see someone, if you see someone waiting to come in before I do, you can let them in as well. Okay. We are now at 115, I think, not counting me. All right, so today the conversation is different. Today we're going to be talking about what to do, how to help the kids. Last time we spent quite a bit of time talking about how to help identify which kids are truly have reading problems, truly have dyslexia, et cetera, and what that looks like and early warning signs. And so last time we talked quite a bit about watching for actual early warning signs, because there are a lot out there that are not really truly warning signs. And we talked about things like kids' inability to rhyme, not able to hear sounds and segment sounds and all that, and family history of reading problems are all pretty substantial early warning signs. There are others as well. Talk about screening with multi-gated, using multiple measures, including intervention as part of your screening. Consider classified intervention as part of the screening process. We're using reliable measures that are developmentally appropriate. Kindergarten's always a tough one. In kindergarten, I suggest really you don't do universal screening probably until winter, but in the fall you can use certainly some measures for kids for whom you're concerned about to start intervention right away. But tier 2 intervention, universal intervention, classified intervention doesn't really make sense with kindergartners until the winter. But certainly there's some kids who come in with some pretty substantial concerns right away, and we should be assessing those kids right away and delivering intervention for them as soon as we can. So that was the conversation last time, was about how to identify kids who are really struggling and which ones are the ones who struggle with reading. So today we're going to talk about something slightly different. Well, not slightly different. Talk about how to help kids. Now, I sent the PowerPoint ahead of time, and I sent the shortened one. Like I took out cartoons, all that kind of stuff. I think I gave you this slide, but the next slide I didn't give you. I left it out for dramatic effect. Okay, so I'm going to talk about special ed, because of course this is relevant to special education and our concerns about kids with severe reading problems and dyslexia and reading disabilities, et cetera. So in 2001, the President's Commission on Excellence in Special Education convened, and they went all across the country, the President's Commission, and I don't know if some of you remember that, they went all across the country and interviewed parents and gathered a lot of data and talked to teachers and really try to get a good sense on what the strengths were in special ed in this country and what areas we need to do a better job in. And they made a few recommendations. Their first recommendation, and they said this is extremely important, we have got to reduce paperwork and increase flexibility. Yeah, we're still waiting for that, right? But that was one of the recommendations: reduce paperwork, increase flexibility. They said we've got to start intervening and identify and intervene early, serve first, assess later. And I wish they hadn't used the word assess, because I don't know how you intervene for a kid without assessing them. But what they meant was identification. Help kids worry about if they have a learning disability later. That's what they meant. Help kids first. They said those that get counted count. Oh, I love that statement. Now, we can have debates about the necessity or lack thereof of accountability tests, state tests. Um, I should have looked up beforehand. I don't remember the name of the state test in Montana. Can someone chat me, please, the state test name in Montana? I forgot to look it up. I'm sorry. Just throw it in the chat. Oh, the state test, the state accountability test. Oh, Smarter Balance, your Smarter Balance state. Okay. I love state test names. In Missouri, we're the Missouri Assessment Program, which is such a boring name. Minnesota, when I was there for 10 years, we were the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment. Boring. But in Virginia, the state test, the state accountability test, is called the Standards of Learning. So in the state of Virginia, the test that all the kids take is abbreviated as the SOL, and it really is. That's really true. And in Utah, it still has the best state test name in the country. Utah, it's the Utah Performance Assessment of State Standards, which they call the UPass. Really clever, right? But of course, all the kids call it the UPass. And of course they do. You know, what committee didn't see that one coming? But they in the accountability movement, the President's Commission said those that get counted count. What they said was kids with disabilities have to be included in these accountability assessments, because if they do, resources and priority will follow. And they were right. I see teachers now sitting around saying, gosh, our kids with learning problems and reading problems, et cetera, aren't doing well enough. And they're looking at data, and that wasn't true, 20 years ago. Now, there are pros and cons to this, and we certainly had that debate, but I think what the President's Commission said is held up. Those that get counted, count. And then lastly, they said we've got to use special ed staff more effectively. Special ed staff are so well trained. We have to take better advantage of that. Now, this is the slide you don't have that I left out for dramatic effect. I'm going to show you the 10 years that preceded the President's Commission. And I'm going to show you a disability category, the number of kids diagnosed in 1991, the number of kids diagnosed in 2001, special ed disability, percent change. So the 10 years that preceded the President's Commission report, okay? Now, I think I'm going to ask you to just give me a thumbs up. So let me do this. I know I can't see all of you, but that's going to have to be okay. So I'm going to start with the disability. Let's start with learning disabilities. Do you think the number of children with a learning disability went up or down during this 10-year period? Give me a thumbs up or a reaction or a thumbs down. So you think it went up or down? Did it go up or down during this 10-year period? Yeah, went up, exactly. During that 10-year period, that's not surprising. The number of kids diagnosed with a learning disability went from 2.2 million to 2.8 million, about a 28% change, increased by about 28%. So I would have guessed it'd be higher than that, but still. How about the number of kids diagnosed with an intellectual disability? Did that go up or down? What do you think? Yeah, we're not, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of this. We're not so sure about that one, are we? That one was up about 11%, 10.8%. What I'd love to see is mild, moderate, severe. OSEP doesn't report the data that way. My guess, and it's nothing more than a guess, is that moderate and severe are down, but mild is up. And that's why we see an increase of 11%. But that's a guess, I don't know. How about emotional disturbance, up or down? Yeah, we're a little more sure about that one, aren't we? Yeah, the number of kids diagnosed with an emotional disturbance was up about 18%. And again, I would have guessed more than that. How about deaf blind, up or down? What do you think? Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? It looks like many are saying, yeah, you're right. That one went down 7.5%. How about other health impaired, up or down, up or down? Yep. During this 10-year period, the number of children diagnosed with other health impaired was up almost 400%. Now that was when attention deficit disorder first came into being, really commonly diagnosed and started to be incorporated under OHI, other health impaired. But honestly, well, I'll come back to that in a second. All right, last one, autism, up or down. Just for the heck of it, go ahead and chat me if you have a guess. Throw it in the chat. What percentage do you think autism was up or down during that 10-year period? What percentage? Take a guess if you're willing to, and throw it it's up, but take a guess. Throw it in the chat box. How much do you think it increased? 50%, 85%, 70, 15, 60, 90, 100, 200, 500, 50, 35? Good. 40, 50, about up 33%, a third. During this 10-year period, 100%, so it doubled. During this 10-year period, the number of children who were diagnosed with autism is up 1,354%. Now, why is that? Why do we see these big changes like this? I think the reason being is that for decades, special ed was the only game in town. Kid can't read, can't sit still, can't do whatever. Basically, our best chance to help them was special ed. And in order to make them get special ed, they had to fit one of our little boxes. And I would argue, the more kind of nebulous, vague the box is, the more it goes up. For example, now autism is its own thing. I get that. Autism is its own thing. But the fact that other health impaired went up by 400%, other health impaired is about as vague as you can get. If you have a parent who savvy parents with resources, right? Parents with resources, who their children's not doing well and they want them to be identified as OHI, it's pretty tough to keep from happening, right? Like so I think that's why we see it go up. We want kids to get help. And so we our categories, they fit into our categories. It jumps out at me though that only one went down. Deaf, blind went down. I think that's because deaf blind is about as objective as a disability as you can get. All the rest of these disabilities have some level of subjectivity to it. Even cognitive impairment. Man, as a school psychologist, I can tell you which IQ test kids will score lower on. Now, of course, I'm not going to do anything that would be unethical, but I know which IQ test kids will score low on. And in Iowa, the IQ cutoff, so the IQ cutoff for intellectual disability across the country usually is a IQ of 70 or lower. And it used to be 85. The whole country used to have an IQ of 85. If you had an IQ of 85 or lower than 85, you were considered cognitively impaired. Now, you've got 16% of the population being diagnosed with a disability, so you provide social support for that disability. You run out of money. What do? You change the criterion. So they made it 70. In Iowa, the IQ cutoff for cognitively impaired is still 85. So that means if you live in Missouri, Iowa's just a little bit north of here, we border Iowa. If you live in Missouri and you have an IQ of 80, forgive my term, but I'm going to make a point, so please forgive my term here. You're mentally retarded, right? You're cognitively impaired. You move a couple miles to the north and move to Iowa, and I'm sorry, if you live in Iowa, sit backwards. Sorry, if you live in Iowa, if an IQ of 80, you're cognitively impaired. You move down to Missouri and you're cured, just like that. Why is the cutoff in Iowa 85? Well, the IQ cutoff is not actually 70. It's 2 standard deviations below the mean. The mean is 100, standard deviation is 15, 2 standard deviations is 30, 100 minus 30 is 70. So it's 2 standard deviations below the mean. The average IQ in Iowa is 115. And 2 standard deviations is 30, 115 minus 30 is 85. They're doing the same thing the rest of us are, just it's a little higher. Now, why is the average IQ in Iowa 115? Has nothing to do with corn, nothing to do with Iowa test of basic skills. It's because, I think, Iowa, now I guess I don't know for sure this is true today, but Iowa has for a long time been the state in the country with the least amount of ethnic and economic diversity. Bunch of middle-class white kids. Doesn't mean there's none, but it's the least amount. So you take those middle-class, you take the kids, on average from minority backgrounds and poverty backgrounds, score on average 15 points lower on IQ test. Take those kids out of the equation, the average IQ goes up 15 points. Even intellectual disability has some level of subjectivity to it. Deaf, blind, man, you can see or you can't. We know how to measure that. We know what it looks like. We have good criteria. Yes, there's legally deaf, legally blind. I get that, but for the most part, that's about as objective as you can get. And if we want our kids to get help, we've got to make it fit our boxes. These more subjective ones, like OHI, and to a degree autism certainly, but emotional disturbance and learning disabilities too, we see those numbers go up. And what we're saying is that in education in this country is a lot like Perkistis's bed. Remember Perkistis? I might be saying that wrong. There's probably some ELA teacher out there who can correct me, but Perkistis from Greek mythology was the guy who lived in this giant mansion between these two major cities in ancient Greece. And you traveled back and forth between these cities by walking. And as you walked back and forth between these two cities, it was a long way, there was no water, there were robbers, very dangerous. So in the middle was this giant, in the middle of nowhere, this giant mansion, Perkistis' mansion, and he would invite you in. You're allowed to spend the night in this mansion and have all the world's greatest wine that you wanted. You could have all that you wanted from this incredible buffet of food, and you're allowed to spend the night in the world's most comfortable bed with only one catch. You had to fit the bed. If you were too tall and your feet hung off, he cut your feet off. If you were too short, he stretched you on the rack until you fit the bed. Education in this country is a lot like that bed. If you fit it, it's an incredible experience. If you don't, there's something wrong with you, and we have to fix you. And what we're finally starting to say is maybe it's time we start to take a closer look at the bed. And so we do so through an MTSS, how I organize it. But we're starting to get a sense of we're not meeting the needs of these kids who are struggling readers. That's why I think we're seeing such a big decoding dyslexia movement in this country, because we're finally starting to recognize that the way we've done things forever helps most kids, absolutely, but it doesn't help our most struggling readers to the level that we need them to do. So I'm going to also make a point here, and I'm hesitant to do this because last week went so well. I left there feeling so good, and it was fun. And I'm thinking, well, I'm going to start this session off by pissing off half the group first, and then I'll probably piss off the other half shortly thereafter. So probably everyone on this call is going to be upset with something I say in the next 20 to 30 minutes. But I want to make this point. Now, coming back to the Perkistis bed thing, if there's something wrong with you, we got to fix you. Well, we talk about dyslexia. There's a real interest in using cognitive measures to identify children who have dyslexia. I don't think we should do that. I don't think we should do it. For example, intelligence, processing speed, working memory, other type of things like that. Kids with dyslexia have lower working memory or lower processing speed. So we should use that to identify dyslexia. Well, I'm going to say that we shouldn't do that. I'm going to say we shouldn't do it for three reasons. It doesn't actually differentiate dyslexia from other types of reading problems. It doesn't improve outcomes, and it doesn't diagnose dyslexia. Okay, so real briefly, why I say it doesn't differentiate. Well, a study by Don Compton and his colleagues in 2012 showed that kids without dyslexia had higher average IQ scores than those with, and we saw an effect size of 0.93. Now, I love effect sizes. I'm sure I talked about them last week. I don't remember, but I'm sure I did. It's a standard deviation unit. So the kids that got the intervention, or the one group was, in this case, 0.93 standard deviation is better than the other group, no matter what the measure was. All you need to know is 0.8 is a large effect. We consider 0.8 to be a large effect, 0.5 to be moderate, and 0.2 to be small. So they're saying, look, there's a large difference here. Kids without dyslexia have higher IQs than kids who had dyslexia. And then this study is more typical. I don't know how to say that. Shootout or whatever, 2008, saw higher working memory scores among typical developing peers than students with dyslexia with a moderate effect of 0.53. Now, we see studies like this all the time. And what I'm going to propose is that when we think that these are large effects, wow, 0.93, that's a huge effect. Well, really, what we're talking about is when we actually graph the distribution of the data based on the size of the effect, we see a 47% overlap. So we have a bunch of kids in here who kind of fall into both groups, right? So if I've got, I've got kids here, if the average is here for typical readers, in LD and reading, this is the IQ score. I've got kids who score, who fall in the LD range, the dyslexic range, who look like typical peers, and vice versa. And we come back to the other study looking at 0.53, looking at working memory. Again, this is what those distributions actually look like. 65% overlap. 2/3 of the kids in this particular study look like each other. It doesn't differentiate. Okay, sure, if I've got a kid here or a kid here, way over here, or way over here, okay, that's different. But for the most part, there's just too much overlap to look at things like working memory, other type things. And I've looked at this is not published yet; it's under review. But some really common differences. Peng and Fuchs found working memory differences, 0.63, but that's 60% overlap. Behavioral, we found 8 studies that looked at behavior differences. Kids with dyslexia have poorer social skills. Effect size at 0.6. That's 62% overlap. Cognitive, all these things I've talked about, working memory, processing, 0.71, 56%, almost 57% overlap. Here's the one thing that does differentiate. Achievement, 1.07, a 40% overlap. Still pretty big, but way less than 60%. What's the one thing that differentiates dyslexic kids from other kids? Reading, period, reading. All these others, this is a paper I've written that is under review right now, so it has not been gone out under peer review yet, but it's under peer review right now. But what's the one thing that truly differentiates dyslexia? Reading. So I don't really care if he scores lower on working memory or higher on processing speed or whatever. All I really care about is, does a kid struggle with reading? Same thing with someone just said visual processing deficits. That's measured under cognitive, and I didn't include, I wish I would have now, physical. I don't know the data off the top of my head, but physical was the visual variables, and that was actually the highest amount of overlap. I think it was 70% overlap. That's from memory. I could be wrong. I'm sorry. So yeah, those don't differentiate either. And more importantly, in my opinion, I should have put this one last, does not improve instruction. So again, these are effect sizes. Meta-analysis I published in 2017, looking at kids with reading disabilities. Are there ways what data can we use to identify them? And not to identify them, to improve instruction. What data can we collect to help drive instruction? And if you look, you'll see cognitive functioning. Yeah, these are effect sizes. 0.8 is a good effect, 0.5 is moderate. Cognitive functioning, measures of cognitive functioning like visual processing, any kind of processing, working memory, etc., a 0.17, small effect. But again, what if you measure phonological phonemic awareness or reading fluency? Well, you see 0.4 to 0.5, much stronger effects, much better effects. And working memory, I love this meta-analysis. Melby Lervog and David Hume. David Hume's a memory researcher. And he did a meta-analysis, again, these are effect sizes, 0.8, 0.5, 0.2, and he saw that working memory training helped reading comprehension and reading skills, basically. Well, reading comprehension. He calls reading comprehension verbal ability, 0.13. Problem solving with kids, negative 0.05. Young kids, 0.03. So basically negligible. Does it help with decoding? 0.13. Does it help with math? 0.07. Negligible effect. Concluding there's no evidence, no convincing evidence that working memory trains generalizes to other skills. Executive function, I'm beating a dead horse now, so I'll just do this real quickly. That's kind of the new one. Famous meta-analysis by Jacob and Parkinson a few years ago, 67 studies, all were pretty recent. Saw that executive functioning was correlated with academic skills, equally for reading and math. This idea that's more correlated with math isn't true. But changing skills in executive function did not lead to increased skills in reading and math, concluding there's no causal link between the two. I've been doing research on academic interventions for kids with reading problems for a long time now. And my conclusion, I've said this before, you want to assess a reading problem. What's the best way to do that? You assess reading. You see if the kid can read. If you want to help a child, you teach them how to read. So, unless he doesn't diagnose, I'll do this real briefly. There's no requirement for IQ in special ed to identify LD in special ed law. There's no requirement for IQ or any measure of processing in any category. The DSM, none of them do that. So I'll just do that real briefly and just touch on that. So instead, I want to focus on intervening. So how do we help kids? So I said a second ago, I'm going to reinforce that in a second. The law says schools have to take steps to identify the Montana law specific needs of the child. I love that. That is so important. We have to identify the specific needs because for a long time, we've been looking for a silver bullet. So again, these are effect sizes, looking at kids with reading problems, learning disability and reading, explicit instruction, reading comprehension. These are effect sizes. 0.8 is a large effect. We see good effect there. Teaching kids explicit reading comprehension instruction, teaching main idea, vocabulary, inferencing, large effect. Explicit instruction, teaching kids their letter sounds, etc. Large effect. Psycholinguistic training, finding that cognitive process that's broken and fixing that, a small to moderate effect. My favorite one of my favorites, modality instruction. If they're a visual learner, auditory learner, kinesthetic learner, no, negligible. It doesn't work. It's never worked. We've known it for years. Learning styles, I don't know why learning styles continue to exist in education. Research has clearly shown it just doesn't adequately differentiate instruction. When we do it, we don't see differential effects. Yes, it's multimodal instruction is great. Yes, I wanted to make sure kids are doing things visually and being engaged physically, absolutely. But does one kid learn better from one approach than the other? The research pretty clearly for 50 years has said, no, it doesn't.
Thank you for stating that.
Thank you. Diet, cut out red dye number 12 and kids can read. No, it's fine, do it. And then my other personal favorite is perceptual training. I don't know what it's like in Montana, but in many states, vision training is kind of a big issue. It's died down a little in popularity, but for a while it was really big. I had a little girl who was cognitively impaired. She was not LD, she was cognitively impaired, and a pretty low functioning kid in one of the schools I worked at. And she was nonverbal. She knew a few signs. That's about it. Nonverbal. Nice little girl, really cute little girl. She was fabulous, but very low functioning. An optometrist moved to town. Went to her parents and said, "I can fix your little girl." And so he made glasses and he explained how the glasses are going to focus the eye and the retina, and he'll train the little girl how to do this. Now, and these were wonderful parents. These were wonderful parents. They wanted to help their kids so badly. And they said, we'll do this, yes. So two things. Number one, while she's receiving this vision training, she can have no special ed support whatsoever. Wait, she was nonverbal. She was a very low functioning little girl. We're supposed to just dump her back in general ed? Well, we did the universal intervention. We did full-time parapro. And I usually argue against that because I think that's the most restrictive environment we can put a kid in. But in this case, we thought, 2 weeks, it's fine. It's 2 weeks training. We'll give her a parapro, see what happens. And by the way, it cost $2,000. Where this family got that money, I don't know. And so we did the 2 weeks, and we're at the IEP meeting. Here we are 2 weeks later, and she's gone through all this vision training. And guess what? Her behavior hadn't changed a bit. She hadn't improved a single bit. It did nothing. And the parents were crushed. And they were crushed emotionally. Imagine someone coming to you and telling you, I can cure your child with a disability. And the parents jumped at it and they were emotionally invested and financially invested, and they were crushed. And we're walking out of the IEP meeting, and they say to me, they walk at me and say, Matt, you were right. We should have listened. You said, be careful. You said, be skeptical. We should have listened. And then they looked at me and said, so what do you know about megavitamins? They were desperate to fix the little girl. For 50 years, we've been looking for a silver bullet. For 50 years, we've been looking for what works, this magic wand, looking at these data, like I said a second ago, what's the best way to teach a kid how to read? You teach them how to read. As Pam said, good instruction. Good instruction is what works. The right brain training is someone commented that falls under the category of the psycholinguistic training. Sure, you might see occasional kid for whom there's some success, but most part it's not very successful. What instead works is teaching explicit instruction in sounds and comprehension. We've known that for 50 years. I hope we find the silver bullet. I really do. That'd be fantastic. For as it is right now, you want your child to learn how to read? even among kids who are struggling readers, even among kids who are dyslexic, your best chance is teach them how to read. So we'll come back to the point made, which is I love that the law says personalized intervention. The law says pretty clearly we have to address the kid's unique needs. I think we have to move away from one size fits all. Because come on, have you ever seen an intervention that worked for every single kid? You know, I wish it did, but it just doesn't. So in preparation for this, I Googled one size fits all. I went to Google Images and Googled it. And this is what I found. This is the very first thing that came up. Now, think about that. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? Like my son is 6'5", and he and I wear the same size sock. And we have since he was like a little boy. It's amazing that one size fits almost everybody. The second thing that came up was Frank Zappa's album of the same name, One Size Fits All. Great album, if you're not familiar with it. I showed this to my undergrads because I thought this was really funny. I said, look, guys, this came up. And they all went, Frank who? Anyway, Frank Zappa's album. The third thing that came up, literally the third thing that came up was this. I have no idea what that is, but that's it. Does one size fit all? No, of course not. And we talk about reading. If I go to a teacher and I say, you've got a room full of, even a special ed teacher with like 10 kids, 15 kids with reading problems. How many different types of reading levels are there in that group? They'll say, oh, there's like 10 different reading levels. How many different types of reading problems are there? Oh, there's like 10 different reading problems. Then why do they all get one intervention? Read 180 is a fabulous tool. It's used mostly at the high school and middle school. It's expensive. That's why I don't like it for that, but it's expensive. But it's a fabulous tool, well researched. I will tell you right now, it is not the intervention that most kids who struggle to read in middle school and high school need. And I'll make that point in just a few minutes. Okay, don't put funny things in the chat. That's unfair. I look over at and laughed. I'm glad you can still fit in your high school socks, John. So read 1.8 at the elementary level. The one right now is LLI. Schools all over the country are using the leveled literacy intervention. It's the part of the font system Pinel system. But when you look at the research on it, and this, by the way, is part of the University of Memphis. I got this off their website. You just Google it, you can find it. They didn't report effect sizes, so I computed them. And the effect size for kindergarten was 0.26, which is small. For first grade, 0.36. Small, maybe, that's not horrible. And second grade was negative, 0.09. Well, in my opinion, LLI, leveled literacy intervention, if you're not familiar with it, it's a leveled approach where kids who are all at the same reading level are grouped together and they read a common book and discuss it and work from that book, et cetera. And it's a great intervention for kids who are struggling with fluency or comprehension. Unfortunately, kids in kindergarten, first and second grade, usually that's not their core deficit. That's not their core deficit. Even good old Orton Gillingham, here's what I'm going to piss off the other half. Even Orton Gillingham. Now, this is a 2006 study, and I'm going to comment on that in just a second. They did a nice review of the 12 studies they found on Orton Gillingham. Now, Orton Gillingham is the holy grail for dyslexia in treatment. As parents, for some reason, I think parent groups involved in decoding dyslexia are oftentimes pushing Orton Gillingham. Now, Orton Gillingham, they found 12 studies, and I'll tell you, I'll get to one punchline, which is in preparation for this and another session I did, I searched to try and find additional studies since 2006 around Orton Gillingham, and I didn't find any, literally. So these 12 still might be the 12 that exist. 11 of them were quasi-experimental. Only one was truly experimental, and that was with college kids, not little kids. Word attack, we see a nice effect on word attack. We see a nice effect on comprehension, a lower effect on word ID, and a lower effect on total reading. So what does that mean? Well, it means my help with word attack, certainly. It seems to have some effect on comprehension. But now let's go look at those 12 studies. 9 used school-age kids. So we 4 compared Orton. So 3 of the studies were older kids, 9 used school-age. 4 compared Orton Gillingham to basal instruction, and they found a 0.85. So in other words, did not end up helping my dyslexic daughter in the long run. I'm sorry to hear that, Megan. It's not a bad intervention, but I'm gonna make this point. It is that 4 studies compared it to basal instruction. So if the kids just get reading instruction or Orton Gillingham, they do much better than Orton Gillingham by getting that. Okay, that makes sense. 3 compared it to remedial instruction. So we get some sort of remedial instruction, and then we see a little bit smaller effect, but still moderate. Two of them compared Orton Gillingham to other interventions, and the effect size now gets down to be pretty, much smaller. So Orton Gillingham, it's effective. It's a 0.85, right? I'm not going to tell you it's not effective. What I'm going to say is it's not that much more effective than a lot of the other things we do. So take a kid who's dyslexic and say, oh, they need Orton Gillingham, probably might not, maybe I'll say this, might not meet their needs. And in special ed, I would argue using Orton Gillingham for all kids who have a learning disability, I can make the argument that's illegal. Special ed's definition has never changed, right? Individualized or specialized instruction at no cost to parents or guardians to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. If you're doing a program of instruction for categorical needs, so Orton Gillingham for kids who have a learning disability, you're not doing individualized for unique needs. I can make the argument that's not legal. Or G is a tool, but it's not the only tool. And I couldn't agree with that more. It is a tool. It's a fine tool, but I don't think it's the holy grail that many of us think it is. And I would actually argue for a lot of the kids, it's not what they need. So I want to start thinking about, let's think about different interventions, and we tend to think of that as leading to proficient reading. But I think that's based on flawed logic. Let's go back to the National Reading Panel. The National Reading Panel did a wonderful meta-analysis. They did the 5 meta-analyses. Actually, they only did 4. They grouped vocabulary and comprehension together. So the National Reading Panel, I'm going to look at the meta-analysis on phonemic awareness. I know this group knows this, but I'll feel the need to say it. Phonemic awareness, because we're going to hit this point later as well, is the knowledge that words are made of sounds. And you can manipulate those sounds. So I take the k in cat and make it a b, and the word is bat. That's phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness can be taught and assessed in the dark. Okay, it's better to teach it with visual stimuli, with letters and such, but it could be assessed and taught in the dark. I sit down with a kid. I developed a phonemic awareness measure a couple years ago, and I think it's funny that I actually had to do it because I could sit down with the kid in 30 seconds, say to the kid, "Hey, I'm gonna say some sounds. Listen, what word is that?" If the kid knows, he has phonemic awareness, and I'll say, "Okay, take the k and cat and make it a b. What word is that?" The kid knows, he has phonemic awareness. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I can screen for phonemic awareness informally in about 30 seconds. So the National Reading Panel looked at, does phonemic awareness instruction help kids learn how to read? They looked at 52 studies, and they found that, they looked at 3 tasks, 3 outcomes. They looked at phoneme manipulation. So does phonemic awareness instruction help kids take the k and cat and make it a b? OG stands for Orton Gillingham. Thank you, Megan, for responding. Can you teach kids to do that? So that was one. And if you do phonemic awareness, does it teach them how to manipulate the phonemes? Does it teach them how to spell? And do they get better at reading? And reading was word reading, pseudo-word reading, reading comprehension, et cetera, et cetera. Here's what they found. Again, these are effect sizes. They said that it was, we saw a better efficiency, effectiveness than no instruction. It improved reading and spelling. Now, they called it strong, but it's more a moderate effect, but still, good effects, whatever. And teaching 1 or 2 was preferable to trying to teach 3 or more. So think of it as a continuum. I think rhyming is the bridge between phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. So I start with rhyming, and then we teach blending and segmenting kind of together. And once they master blending and segmenting, then we move to manipulation. Don't try and teach all 4 at the same time. And it benefited reading comprehension. Now, when this came out in 2001 or so, it was huge news. I was a reading interventionist. I'm doing phonemic awareness interventions all the time. And I saw that it worked, but not all the time. So I went back and looked at the original data. Thought, let's think about those list of things they called reading, pseudo-word reading, word, et cetera, et cetera. I said, those are all related with different skills. So I grouped them into 3 big buckets: nonsense words, pseudo words, words in isolation, word lists, and actual connected text reading. And this is the effect size. So if they used pseudo words, reading nonsense words like nonsense word fluency, et cetera. Yes, I can. I will in a second, Pam. If they use pseudo words, then there was a large effect, 0.84. So using phonemic awareness instruction helped kids decode words that they had to sound out. Does help them read words in isolation, a word list, absolutely, 0.92. But look at actual connected text reading, 0.37. Still not horrible, but way less than this. So my conclusion was, when should you do phonemic awareness instruction? When the kid lacks phonemic awareness. Think about that. This is such a mind-blowing idea for many educators. If a child has phonemic awareness, why are you reteaching that as an intervention? If the child has good decoding skills, why would your intervention focus on that? But say it the reverse. If your child doesn't have phonemic awareness, working on reading fluency isn't going to help. So we have to stop thinking of these as leading to proficient reading and think of them as leading to very specific skills. And that's going to be the conversation for today. And so, Pam, I'll restate that for phonemic awareness. Basically, I consider rhyming the bridge between phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. So I start with rhyming. Once they master rhyming, or at least pretty good at it, then we teach them how to blend and segment. And I do blending and segmenting pretty much together. And then we teach, after they master that, we teach manipulation. So take the k and cat and make it a b, and the word is bat. So generally speaking, use that sequence. I think that sequence is important. The rhyming versus blending and segmenting. You might teach blending and segmenting separately, but certainly don't try and teach all four of those at the same time. That's my complaint with Heggerty. Now I know Heggerty is a wonderful tool. It's a supplemental phonemic awareness tool. If your school doesn't have good phonemic awareness instruction in kindergarten or even first grade, Heggerty, I'm saying Heggerty, it's a supplemental reading phonemic awareness intervention for core instruction. It's great, but it covers too much, too fast. It needs to slow it down a little bit. So teachers I've seen who do a good job of that, take that lesson, which is broken up maybe in 2 to 3 days already, and make it like 5 days. If you do that, then it seems to work better. And that's why I don't think it's a good tier 2 intervention, because it covers too much. But I want to start thinking of these interventions as leading to very specific skills, and I use the framework of the National Reading Panel. So my buckets are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. So I'm going to think of these as a ladder. Okay, each one of these is a rung. So kids step on phonemic awareness. Once they learn that, they step on phonics. Once they learn that, they can move up to fluency. Once they learn that, they get to the top of vocabulary comprehension. Now, for dyslexic kids, for kids who are struggling readers, this sequence holds true. Research by Virginia Berninger and others has supported that. Good readers don't always follow this. Good readers make no sense. I'm so glad I studied struggling readers, because good readers just baffle me. They do, I see kids who don't decode well, but they're good. Good readers just make no sense to me. But struggling readers typically step on the ladders in this sequence, the rungs of the ladder in this sequence. Phonemic awareness to phonics to fluency to vocabulary comprehension. Sometimes it's faster for some. Sometimes these two blend really. It varies, but most of the kids who struggle, most kids are dyslexic, we think of these 4 buckets, and they have to work their way up. So our task is to assess those 4 areas and to determine which deficit area is the most fundamental, most foundational skill in which the kid struggles. So let's talk about measures of these. Now, many of your schools use MAP, NWEA, Measures of Academic Progress, or STAR, or some group tests like that. Those are fine screeners, as I talked about last time. Those are pretty heavily comprehension loaded, as is, by the way, A-reading. A-reading, the FastBridge measure, which is a good one too. Pretty much any group administered reading test is pretty comprehension loaded. NRP stands for National Reading Panel. I'm sorry if I didn't say that. The National Reading Panel. Oh, it says right here. I'm sorry. 4 areas of the National Reading Panel. So vocabulary comprehension, MAP, STAR reading, those are good measures of comprehension. So if your school is screening with MAP in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade, those are good screeners, but they're also good indicators of comprehension. Now, oral reading fluency. Oral reading fluency, you measure reading fluency, oral reading fluency, all your CBMRs, your DORF from Dibbles, which is still the worst name ever developed for a test. Dibbles has its Dibbles oral reading fluency, which they call DORF. CBMR from AimsWeb, CBMR from FastBridge. I think Easy CBM calls it CBMR. All of those oral reading fluency measures are good screeners for younger kids, 2nd through 5th grade. That's a good screener. That's also a darn good measure of reading fluency. There are others, test of sonic contextual reading fluency, test of word reading efficiency, there are others. But if you're already doing CBMR with your kids and MAP, man, you've got a lot of data with which to work right there. Decoding, how do you measure decoding? Okay, nonsense word fluency. I probably mentioned this last time, I'll say it again. Co-director of the Minnesota Center for Reading Research, nonsense word fluency kind of drives me nuts because it's not reading. But I'm not using it to assess reading. I'm using it to assess, can the child decode the word? It does that. The only way you can decode that word is by sounding it out, right? You can't visually recognize it. There's no context clues. So if you want to see if a child can decode, it does that really well. It doesn't tell you much about their reading, just tells you if you can decode or not. Word attack subtest, the Woodcock-Johnson, pseudo word subtest. Any of those kind of pseudo word measures are good measures of decoding. By the way, spelling. I think I mentioned this last time because I talked about screening. Spelling is a good indication of decoding of phonics. I'll say it again. I know I said it last time. I'll say it again. Most kids who have poor decoding skills don't spell well. But there are lots of kids who struggle with spelling who decode just fine. So spelling is not a good screener. But if I have some reading measure that says this kid's a struggling reader and they're low in spelling, there's a good chance they're struggling with decoding. I'll come back to that second in just a second. Okay, Ruth, I saw your question. I'll address that in a second. Phonemic awareness. I have the phonemic awareness inventory. Now, did I send that to you when I sent the handout? I'm not sure I did. So what I'll do is I may have sent it to you last time. I feel like I sent this to you, but I don't remember doing it. At break, I will send you the PAI and the decoding inventory as well. We have a decoding inventory that helps for phonics, but I'll send you the phonemic awareness inventory. I'll send it to Aileen, who can then distribute it. We develop it. I'm sure I showed you this. We developed it with the PRESS project I mentioned last time in Minnesota. And it's a great quick way to quickly screen kids for phonemic awareness to see if they struggle with phonemic awareness. So I'll send it to you. Now, our task then is to measure these skills and to find out what's the most fundamental skill. Thank you, Aubrey. I was pretty sure I did. I couldn't remember doing it for sure. It's a fine little measure. Takes a few minutes to do. So we've got data. If you're doing MAP and CBMR, well, you've got some good data to start with right there. And if you want to go further, here's the phonemic awareness inventory, which I've already sent you. But basically, what we do is we start with fluency or comprehension. Okay, so let's say we're talking about a 7th grade kid, and for that kid, we use MAP as the primary screener. Okay, so let's say those kids score low, and we give them the MAP. Are they proficient on the MAP? Are they good comprehenders? Well, yeah, then they just get good core instruction. Okay, if they're low in comprehension, we're not done. Now we're going to assess the fluency skills of those kids. So if I'm in 7th grade, I don't use oral reading fluency as my screener because it takes too long. But I will take the kids who score low on the MAP, that's your star or whatever you're using, and just look at those kids' reading fluency skills. So I assess reading fluency. Can they read fluently? Yes. Okay, then we know comprehension is their target. If they don't have good fluency, then we look at decoding. Can they decode? Yes. Okay, we know interventions there, that fluency is their target. If not, we might look at phonemic awareness. If that's good, then we know we should intervene for decoding. If they have low phonemic awareness, we intervene for phonemic awareness. So let's look at it from our run perspective. Okay, good. So let's look at it from our run perspective. So I said kids start with phonemic awareness. So I'm going to start top here and work our way backwards to find the most fundamental skill in which the kid struggles. So if they have low comprehension, low fluency, but good decoding, there's no reason to intervene for decoding. The most fundamental skill in which that kid struggles is fluency. So our intervention would address fluency. If they're low in comprehension, low in fluency, low in decoding, and we look at phonemic awareness, and they have good phonemic awareness, there's no reason to intervene for that. They get core instruction, sure, that's great. But if they're low in comprehension, low in fluency, low in decoding, but good phonemic awareness, we target decoding. Phonics. If they're low in comprehension, have good fluency, we focus on comprehension. If they have good fluency and good decoding, don't intervene. Look at comprehension. All right, so let's try one. I'm going to see 100 chats here. We're going to try it. In fact, why don't we do this? Privately chat me. Go to where the chat is. Click on the 2. I think I'm at the top, aren't I? Oh, I'm not, am I? Oh, I can't see myself probably. I think I'm at the top. Send this as a private chat to me, so I'm the only one that sees it. I'm going to give you a couple scenarios. I want you to tell me what the kid needs. It's going to rattle off a bunch of them, so I'll try to read them. All right. So a kid who's low on comprehension, scored low on the MAP, low on fluency, low on decoding, low on phonics, but good phonemic awareness. What's our bucket for that kid? What's our bucket for that kid? Just put it in the private chat. Just send it just to me. I'll let people do that before I comment. I want to do this a couple times. People are getting it good. Oops. I'm gonna do a couple of these. Yes, I will. Low in comprehension, low in fluency, low in decoding, but good phonemic awareness. Low in comprehension, low in fluency, low in decoding, good phonemic awareness. What's their target? Awesome. Awesome, awesome. There's 100 of you, so I want to give it a little bit. Good, good, Ruth. Okay, good. Yes, go ahead, Megan. Don't be uncertain. Yes, you're correct. Good. So, yeah, this is low in comprehension, low in fluency, low in decoding, low in phonics. I use the word decoding and phonics interchangeably. I really shouldn't. They're different things. Phonics is the instruction. Phonics is the study of, and decoding is what the kid does. And so they're slightly different. But if I say phonics decoding, I'm talking about teaching kids how to sound out words. So low in comprehension, low in fluency, low in phonics, good phonemic awareness, we would start with phonics. A couple of you were very careful to say, start with phonics. Yes, phonics first, but it's certainly in your decoding intervention. I'm hoping if you have a 30-minute decoding intervention, you're going to have the kid read some connected text. Of course you will. But that might be 5 minutes, not 20 or 30 minutes. You might even do a couple things at the beginning that reinforce phonemic awareness for like 5 minutes. Okay, that's fine. When I do my intervention program, I tell the teachers, here's the intervention script. Do this as written. You have 30 minutes. 20 minutes, 15 minutes is plenty of time for most interventions except for comprehension. I can do a good decoding intervention in 15 minutes a day. So I tell my teachers, you want to take 5 minutes at the beginning to do something as a warm-up, 5 minutes at the end to build generalization, whatever, go for it. Do whatever you want. You're a skilled teacher, do whatever you want. But give me those middle 15 minutes. So those middle 15 minutes for the kid I just described is decoding. And yes, should be done with fidelity as well. Couldn't agree more. Okay. I have too many messages now. I forgot the thing I'm supposed to comment down, so I'll come back to it. I'll try to. Let's do another one. I want to do one more. I'm going to do two more actually. Good vocabulary comprehension, good poor, start over again, rewind. Poor vocabulary comprehension. Can you still work on manipulation, make sure the foundation set for PA? Someone just asked, in the example I just gave, low decoding skills. You can assess manipulation, and if they struggle with manipulation, you can, that should be your intervention target. If they struggle with manipulation, they don't have phonemic awareness. That should be your intervention target. Now, if you want to take 5 minutes at the beginning of the intervention to reinforce it, I think that's totally fine. But your emphasis will be on decoding. Okay, so vocabulary comprehension is low. Fluency is low. Good decoding skills. Good phonemic awareness. Low comprehension. So go ahead and private chat, just me, which is what's our target? Private chat, just me. Good vocabulary. I did it again. Back to both low vocabulary, low fluency, good phonics, good phonemic awareness. It's rolling in and you're doing great. Low comprehension, low fluency, good decoding, good phonemic awareness. Good. We'll wait a few more minutes to make sure people are having a chance to respond. Yes. Oh, I don't know what your first name is. L. Lewis looks like. Yeah, be confident. You're correct. I love when people put the answer and they put a question mark. That's what I'm commenting on. Yeah, be confident. You're right. Yes, good. So low comprehension, low fluency, good decoding, good phonemic awareness. Your target is reading fluency. Okay, you want to build that fluency first. Okay. Okay. Yes, good. I put vocabulary comprehension together. Some people are mentioning vocabulary. You know, it's almost never a bad idea to focus on vocabulary to some extent, especially kids who are English language learners. So people are getting this. We're gonna spend a few more minutes on how to do this and what some interventions are. But I'll make this comment right now. There are a couple things that are different for kids who are emerging bilinguals. I did a study. I may have mentioned this last week too. We did a study. We looked at rhyming with kids who are from urban areas and emerging bilinguals. And rhyming did not predict later reading growth very well. So if I have a kid who is an emerging bilingual, an ELL student, even a kid in an urban area or high poverty area, and I'm trying to teach rhyming to begin phonemic awareness instruction, and they're not learning it, Try and teach it, but move on. Move on. Don't worry about it. Get to blending, segmenting, manipulating. Don't hold back your instruction when the kid is emerging bilingual because they can't, they're not learning how to rhyme very well. Move on. The other point I'll make is kids who are English language learners, I'm using the term emerging bilingual. One of my students who does research in this area has corrected me a number of times saying we shouldn't call them English language learners anymore. We should call them emerging bilingual students because we want them to still learn their native language. Okay, makes sense. So what we do for kids like that is they shake out where they shake out. So the data suggests that they are, again, don't put funny things in the chat. I can't help but look at it and laugh. If they fall into the bucket, they have good, poor comprehension, poor fluency, but good decoding and good phonemic awareness, they get a fluency intervention. If phonics is their target, they get that. But every single time we add a vocabulary component to the intervention. So if we're doing fluency, we might give the kids a passage and there's like 3 or 4 words in the passage that are good ones to teach. We'll give them pictures of those 3 or 4 words and we'll talk about what those pictures are and what they mean. And we'll point to the word before we do any fluency. If we're doing repeated reading, I look at a passage, they're going to do repeated reading with this passage today, or we're going to do continuous reading with these 5 passages. I'm going to point to a couple words from that passage and show them a picture of it and say, that's this word, this is what it means. This word is chair. Picture of a chair, put chair. What's this word in your language, in Spanish? They'd say it. Good, okay, this is chair. And do that first. If I'm doing decoding, let's say I'm going to teach the CH sound that day, the CH digraph. So I'll say, okay, here's some words that start with the CH sound. Before I do any intervention, here's a picture of a chair, a picture of cheese, a picture of, what else starts with CH? I can't think of any others. Anyway, you get the idea. And talk about what that is beforehand. So always, 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 for kids who are English language learners, incorporate a vocabulary component to the intervention. In fact, I'm going to show you the source, assuming I put my hands on it in 30 seconds, which if I can't, I'll be surprised. Oh, I thought it was sitting right here. I use it all the time. I can't believe it's not sitting right here. I'll tell you the name of it in a second, right, if I can't find it. Oh, I'm not going to find it. Oh, well, I'll tell you the name of it. I'm surprised. I use it all the time. I hope that doesn't mean one of my students have it. I bet it does. All right, it's a book by Sharon Vaughn. I'm going to find it on Amazon and show it to you that way. Okay, so this is a book. It's Sharon Vaughn. She's not the lead author. Sylvia Lynn Thompson is the lead author, but it's called Research-Based Methods of Reading Instruction for English Language Learners, Grades K-4. It's actually kind of old now. Oh my gosh, you can buy it for $1.50 used? Oh my gosh, go buy it right now. It's not really, I argue, reading instruction. It is a bunch of ways to infuse vocabulary into reading instruction for kids who are English language learners. So that's a great resource. But anytime I do a reading intervention for a kid who's an English language learner, emerging bilingual, I will assess them and they shake out where they shake out. They get that intervention, but I add a vocabulary component to it every time. And by the way, if the kid demonstrates phonemic awareness in their native language, but not in English, they have phonemic awareness. The kid who's speaks Spanish doesn't do well in your phonemic awareness measure, try giving it to them in Spanish and see if they can do it then. Would it be a good resource for all learners? That's a darn good question, Sherry. As I said a minute ago, adding vocabulary to almost any intervention you do is, pretty much always a good idea, at least not a bad one. I haven't tried it with other kids, so I can't really speak to that very confidently. But again, infusing vocabulary is not a bad thing. All right, so, okay, let's do one more. Everyone privately chat me this. Okay, the kid is low in comprehension, low in fluency, low in phonics, low in phonemic awareness. What do you address? Low in all 4. What do you address? Privately chat me. What's your bucket? I'll people are responding, and everyone's getting this. A couple of you put questions. I said come back to it. And now I've had 200 chats since then, so I don't see the question anymore, and I've forgotten what they were. So if you ask me a question I haven't addressed it, wait a couple minutes because we're still seeing hundreds of response here, and restate it. And I'll try and come back to it. Okay. Yep. Phonemic awareness. Yep. Everyone's getting that. Good. Rhyming potentially. Yeah, that's good. Good point, Carol. So there's been a couple studies looking at phonemic awareness. And generally speaking, we find it's more effective. I think I said a minute ago, it can be assessed and taught in the dark. And I do lots of phonemic awareness games, lots of rhyming games, really fun. But it's better if you link a letter to it. So for example, your Elkonin boxes. Your Elkonin boxes, which you use to teach phonemic awareness. You say to the kid, I'm gonna say the word cat. You hear it, put the stuff in like that, or you can have 3 of them and push 1 up each time. What I'll do instead of using a marker is I have magnetic letters, which I won't dig up now, but I have a magnetic letter for a C, a magnetic letter for an A, and a magnetic letter for a T. So I say to the kid, at. Instead of sliding a marker up, they slide the magnetic letter up. Little things like that you can do to reinforce sound-symbol relationship as you're working on phonemic awareness is a good idea. All right, let's look at some other ways to do this. We talk about those. That. So, as I mentioned, I want you to assess those 4 areas. Now, these data are actually kind of a lot of data that you need right now. This is pretty typical. This is a school. They use MAP with their kids as a screener. This school does both MAP and CBM. So Ames Web or Dibbles, FastBridge, Easy CBM. It's fine. So MAP is a strange scoring system. They use a Roche modeling system, which is great. Psychometrically is great. But I don't know how to interpret the scores. So I have no idea what a score of 161 means. So I convert it to the percentile rank. And you can debate percentile rank. I use 40th percentile as a screener. So any kid scoring at the 40th percentile or lower, that's a good indication that they're struggling in reading. But if I'm using it to identify a target, I tend to use the 25th percentile. So once kids identify a struggling reader, if they're below the 25th percentile, that suggests they're struggling with that particular skill. But that's a policy decision. You can use 40th just as well. So any of these kids here, so I don't know what these numbers mean, this RIT score, so I just look at the percentile rank. This is the percentile rank for this score. So all these kids are really low. This kid's below the 25th, below 25th, one exception here, but he's still below the 40th. So up until about here, all these kids are pretty clearly scoring low on the MAP, and so that means they're low with comprehension. MAP, STAR, Ames, A reading from FastBridge, Iowa Test of Basic Skills, iReady even, Fontes and Pinnell, any of those measures, the screeners that they use are basically measures of comprehension, basically. That's a bit oversimplified for some of those. But certainly for the MAP, certainly for STAR, certainly for any group administered measure of reading, it's usually comprehension. So the kid scores low on the MAP, below the 25th percentile, for sure, they're struggling with comprehension. All right, we're not done with those kids. So now we look at their oral reading fluency. And let's say, I don't know what the criterion is, but let's say it's 60. Okay, so any kid reading less than 60 words a minute suggests they're struggling. I just get that from their norm. So Dibbles says, a kid reading 60 words or less is struggling with fluency for that age, for that time. So whatever it is the norm is, I use that. Okay, so I've got kids who are low on their RIT score, low in comprehension, and they're all pretty low in fluency as well, because this is oral reading fluency is a direct measure of reading fluency. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Ames Web, Dibbles, Easy CBM, they do something that drives me nuts. They report errors per minute. Errors per minute are meaningless data. If a kid makes 5 errors while reading 100 words in a minute, that means something very different than a kid who makes 5 errors while reading 20 words in a minute. So I take those errors per minute and I use that to determine the accuracy. I convert to an accuracy. What I'm going to do this. Let's do it this way. I lost my Zoom. Where'd you go? Okay, so let's do some computation here. So let's say we look at the data and I have a kid reading 65 words a minute with 5 errors. Okay, so 65 words per minute plus 5 errors means the kid read 70 words in a minute, 70 total words, 65 correct ones, 5 errors. So now I'm going to take that 65 words per minute, divide by the total words, 70, means the kid read 93% of the words correctly. Do another one. Say a kid read, 108 words in a minute with 7 errors. 108 words per minute with 7 errors. So I'm going to go 108 plus 7, 108 words per minute plus 7 errors, 115 words, total words. 107 of them he read correctly, divided by 115, equals 93%. I'll keep it 93%. So let's do 60 words per minute with 10 errors. 60 words per minute with 10 errors means 60 plus 10 is 70, 70 total words. 60 divided by 70 means he read 86% of his words correctly. Okay, I hope that makes sense to everyone. Yeah, it's just, so the formula is just simply what I'm just simply doing is percentage, oh, nothing happened. There we go. Percentage equals the words read correctly per minute, like the total words read correctly per minute, divided by words read correctly per minute plus the errors. That's all it is. So they read 40 words a minute and made 10 errors. It means they read 50 total words. Oops, sorry. So they read 40 words per minute with 10 errors. Means they read 50 words per minute. 40 divided by 50 is 80. They read 80% of the words correctly. Good. Okay. All right, so oops, let's switch this. There. So now let's look back at these data again. Now, I won't explain all the research behind it. My screen is paused. My share screen is paused. I don't know why. Let's share it again. Is everyone seeing my PowerPoint okay? Give me a thumbs up if you are. Okay, good. It said it was paused. I don't know why. Yes, Dibbles does now report accuracy. So a couple of them started doing that, which is really awesome. But if they haven't, it's really simple to compute. So what all you want to do is compute the percent error accurate. And generally speaking, if a child is reading less than 93%, now that's slightly different what Dibble says, but less than 93%, if they're reading less than 93% of the words correctly, they're probably struggling to break the code. So let's look at these. I have a kid's first percentile for comprehension, or for maps, who's low in comprehension. 30 words a minute, he's low in reading fluency. 77% correct, he's low in decoding, probably. This kid needs decoding intervention. I can almost promise you. Let's look at another one. 6th percentile for comprehension, 36 words a minute, so that's low, 86% correct, that's below 93%. He's struggling with decoding. Whereas let's look at this kid. 8th percentile for comprehension, 50 words a minute, 96% correct. He's low in comprehension, low in fluency, but has really good accuracy. So if he's low in comprehension, low in fluency, but good accuracy, which means probably good decoding, his target is fluency. He'd be a perfect candidate for some fluency building. Yeah, Fastbridge wants 95% accuracy, and Dibbles talks about that too. I use 95%. Remember, I'm using it not to demonstrate proficiency. I'm using it to say this kid's struggling with decoding. So I use a slightly lower number, 93%. And we've done lots of research around that, which I won't for time's sake get into, but 93% suggest they're struggling with decoding. Older kids, though, you can use 95%. So if I've got a fifth grader, sixth grader, seventh grader who doesn't read 95% of the words correctly, I'm probably suspicious of that child's decoding skills. But certainly, I got this kid here who's low in comprehension, low in fluency, but good, accurate reading. He's probably decoding fine. So he's probably low in comprehension, low in fluency, but good decoding. And this is what I love about doing this. So compare these two kids. This kid's reading 50 words a minute. This kid's reading 57 words a minute. This kid's 8th percentile. This kid's 9th percentile. So look very much alike here. 96%, 88%. This kid might need decoding, and this kid might need fluency building. They might need two different interventions. We haven't talked about interventions yet. We'll show you that in a second. We're getting the target. So let's practice this a couple times. Let's see. Let's start with an easy one. We can do the same thing we did earlier. You can privately chat me. Privately chat me. I'll pick student number 27. Okay. Student number 27, 3rd percentile for MAP, so low in comprehension, 27 words per minute for oral reading fluency, 87% accuracy. These assessments are at students' grade level. Yes, these assessments are at students' grade level. So in the screening, MAP was low, oral reading fluency was low, and their accuracy was low. What type of interventions that kid need? Throw it in the chat box. What would we start with? Low in comprehension, low in fluency, low in decoding. What did we start with? Yep. Yep, good. Yep, decoding, very good. Decoding, excellent. How about, let's pick another kid. Oh, that's almost too easy. Awesome. Okay, someone just said check phonemic awareness. Let me comment on that. Actually, let me do one more, then I'll comment on that. Oh, that's fine, we'll try it. This kid, well, the kid I showed you was the best example. I kind of blew it. This kid here who is 8th percentile, 50 words a minute, 96% correct, is low in comprehension, low in fluency, but good decoding. So low in comprehension, low in fluency, good decoding suggests fluency. Good. All right. So let me make a quick comment on phonemic awareness, and then someone's asked when we'll plan on taking a break. I was planning on 11:30 my time because we're going to 1 o'clock my time. So that would be halfway through. So yeah, so we'll take a break in just a few minutes. Yes, exactly. Low in comprehension, low in fluency, good decoding. They probably need fluency building. All right, let me make a comment on phonemic awareness. Phonemic awareness is, you'll see a developmental pattern. Honestly, I'm talking about differentiating intervention for tier 2, and honestly, with most kids in kindergarten, just do phonemic awareness. The need to differentiate is not very important. The older the kid is, the more important it is to differentiate. So kindergarten, phonemic awareness, yes. First grade, you're going to see phonemic awareness still, but a lot, start to see decoding start to become a real issue as the primary target. Second grade, you're going to see mostly decoding. Beginning of the year, you'll still see a few kids who struggle with phonemic awareness, but by middle of the year, it's almost all decoding. At the end of the year, you'll start to see fluency start to pop up as the beginning of the core deficit. Third grade, it's fluency of decoding. Fourth grade, fluency decoding. Comprehension starts to appear as a primary deficit. By about 5th grade, it's fluency versus comprehension, but still a lot of kids with decoding. I'm going to show you some data in a second that show you a bunch of high school kids who can't decode. Developmentally, most children have phonemic awareness by 2nd grade. Even among kids who struggle, most of them have phonemic awareness pretty well developed by 3rd grade. So beyond 2nd grade, I don't systematically look at phonemic awareness. So if I have a 4th grader and they're low in comprehension, low in fluency, low in decoding, I'm just going to dive into decoding, with one exception. If I have a 5th grader, a 3rd grader, low in comprehension, low in fluency, low in decoding, I'm just going to dive into decoding. I won't even look at phonemic awareness, with one exception. Here's my scientific exception. Unless the kid is really, really low. If the kid is really, really low, then I'll screen their phonemic awareness. Look at these 3 kids up here. They meet my scientific criterion of really, really low. 1st percentile, 2, 7, 11 words a minute, 20, 41, and 52% correct. That's really, really low. I'm gonna pull those three kids and do the phonemic awareness inventory with those three kids. It'll take me 5 minutes. Now, 5 minutes total, probably. Now, is this kid really, really low? I don't know. I would say no, but I mean, come on, 6th percentile, 22 words a minute, 82% correct. It'll take me a few minutes to do a phonemic awareness assessment of the kids. Maybe I do. All I'm saying is that this kid here, 1st percentile, 38 words a minute, 91% correct. This kid here, 24th, 42, 91. I'm not going to screen the phonemic awareness. I'm just going to dive in. Now, I might find out into it that, wow, this kid may not have phonemic awareness, but the chances of that are pretty slim. These three kids, I will screen their phonemic awareness. If they need phonemic awareness, I will hit that as well. I will hit that. That will be the target. Okay. All right. I hope that makes sense. So I don't screen systematically phonemic awareness beyond the 2nd grade, unless they're really, really low. Then I look at it. Okay. And if they're low in phonemic awareness, and I don't care if they're in 5th grade, they still don't have phonemic awareness, we're going to hit phonemic awareness. That's going to be our intervention. But if I've got a kid in 4th grade who's low comprehension, low fluency, low decoding, I'm just going to dive in with decoding, and unless they're really, really low. Okay. I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and take our 10-minute break. Why don't we make it a 15-minute break? Take a 15-minute break, and we'll come back and we're going to review this one more time to look at what type of intervention the kids need, and then we'll start talking about actual interventions. Now, eventually, I want to get to how to deliver intensive interventions, but I'm really hitting this hard because I think this is actually a skill that most students don't have. Most teachers don't have this idea of differentiating, and it's required in your law. So I would argue this is how you should do it. Okay. I'll comment on this. If you have an abundance of students popping up for PA still in 2nd grade, is it a curriculum issue? Yes, 100%. That's when Haggerty comes into play. Haggerty is a fine phonemic awareness supplemental tool that would really help in that scenario. I'll show you some interventions that we can use at Tier 2 for these different skills. Okay, so let's take, what time is it? Here's my phone. It is now 10:26 your time. So we will come back at, I guess, what, 10:41? Is that right? Yeah, 10:41 your time. So about a 15-minute break, okay? All right, see you in a few minutes. Okay, it's been 15 minutes, so everyone can please come back and start turning on cameras and do what you have to do. We'll start up again in about 1 more minute. All right, let's get started up again. A couple of you asked questions about dibbles and such, so let me make a quick point on that. I don't like the way Dibbles does this, to be honest. First of all, they have their composite score, which is actually the best screener to use. This is really the best screener. And so, let me make that smaller. Yeah, their names are just terrible. Days and Dorf, whatever. So second grade, middle of the year, the way they do this, I think, is terrible. Any kid with a composite score is less than 190 suggests they need an intervention. What they say is if it's below 145, they need intensive intervention. I question that. I don't think there's really research to support that, but that's not today's conversation. So if we look at oral reading fluency, what they're saying is by second grade, you should be reading 72 words per minute. So in second grade, middle of the year, if you're less than 72 words per minute, you're struggling with decoding. And they have a slightly higher accuracy, but again, I'd stick to 93%. And so if you're in, fifth grade, middle of the year, they're saying 120 words a minute. So kids less than that means they're struggling with reading fluency. Okay. And let me show, well, I'll show you this later. Right. Okay. Okay. So someone asked about the school collected dibbles first, and the map doesn't happen until a couple months into the school year. What percentile would you use? Use the dibbles cut point, like I just showed you. Use that. That's the one they've developed through research and norms. It's usually 40th percentile, but use that until you get your map data. So far, I've talked a lot about types of interventions that are effective and the ones that aren't, and how to figure out which bucket the kid is in. We're going to finish talking about that here, and then talk about buckets to interventions to fill those buckets. So let's look now. So as I mentioned before, the Path to Reading Excellence in School Sites, that grant I got from Target, the group of us got to develop this MTSS tiered approach to helping kids learn how to read. And we did lots of things came out of that. I mentioned the manual and the website and all that, but what really came out of it, it's one of my favorite things, is this simple analysis to action form. We developed one for second through sixth grade. We developed one, actually really second through eighth. We piloted this to eighth grade. The previous slide, is that the one, what's the previous slide? Yeah, no, I made that up right now. I just made that up a few minutes ago. So I'll leave it there for a second if you want to screenshot it. We created this form that we call analysis to action. We have a kindergarten one, first grade, second through, and now through 8th grade. We piloted this through 8th grade. And our teachers sit down when they do their screenings 3 times a year, and they look at their data to determine what the intervention is. So they'll sit around with the kid and they'll say, we talked about this last time, is a class-wide intervention necessary? Well, the median was 93.5. This is second grade, Mrs. Ittner's class. Looking at the oral reading fluency, probably Dibbles. Actually, it was Ames Webb. The median was 93.5 for the class. The criterion is 91. Is there a class-wide need? Remember that from last week? No, there isn't. They're above the median, so we're good. So we had 7 kids, which is a little high. Any more than that, I start to still get concerned, but 7 kids who are identified as needing reading instruction. Then these kids, we didn't put their MAP data on here, maybe because this district doesn't use MAP, or maybe these kids are just all low in MAP. So what they've done is they've written down words correct per minute, errors, and the accuracy, and then they use that. So these kids are low in fluency and accuracy, so they get decoding. These kids are low in fluency but have accurate reading, so they get fluency. And we just fill it out. Then we group the kids. These 3 kids get grouped, these 4 kids get grouped. And now maybe because I've got 3 kids and 4 kids, so the other second grade teacher, maybe they have 2 kids who have decoding and 2 that need fluency. I'll take the 2 fluency kids, I'll run a fluency group. My 3 decoding kids go with her 2 decoding kids and they get decoding. So once we figure out the buckets they're in, then we just simply group the kids based on that and deliver the intervention that addresses it. Kindergarten. So here's the criteria for this is letter naming fluency. Letter naming fluency, I mentioned this last week, is still the best, most accurate screener in kindergarten. It predicts long-term reading growth better than any other measure we use. It just doesn't tell you what to do. It's a terrible, diagnostically, it tells you nothing, but it tells you the kid's a struggling reader or not, or could be a struggling reader, struggles with early literacy skills. Letter sound fluency, LSF, of course, letter sound fluency is, do they know their letter sounds? That falls in line with decoding. Phoneme segmentation fluency, that is, listen, I'm gonna say it sound, a word, cat. What sounds do you hear in cat? Kid says cat. I'm gonna say another sound, another word, dog. What sounds do you hear? Dog. So can the kid separate the phonemes in the sound? So if this is just a reading screener, this is aligns with decoding. Phoneme segmentation fluency aligns with phonemic awareness. So let's see. So any kid with a letter naming fluency less than 38 is identified with struggling with early literacy skills. So pretty much all these kids, but let's look and see, are they low? 20 or below is low in letter sound fluency, 18 or below is low in phoneme segmentation fluency. So all these kids right here, right, yeah, are low in letter sound fluency and also low in phoneme segmentation fluency. In fact, as I said earlier, pretty much any kid who struggles in kindergarten, just do phonemic awareness and you're probably fine. Pretty much all these kids who are struggling are going to need phonemic awareness. Is that true? Well, a couple of them are. Once the closer the number is to the cut point, the less confidence you have in the decision. So when it's a 20 and they're at 21, 22, 19, 18, that could be measurement error. This cut point's 18, so they're right at 18 or 19. That could be measurement error. So if you're worried about it, you have 2 options. Just pick one and go with it, or do another assessment. So this kid here, 22 sounds per minute, 22 names per minute, 22 when it's supposed to be 20, 19 is supposed to be 18. Man, he's right at the border every single place. I'm going to pull that kid and do another phonemic awareness measure with him just to be safe. But these kids are all pretty much low in this decoding measure and this early decoding measure and this brief measure of phonemic awareness. So this kids will get phonemic awareness probably. And once you do that, now here we literally come up with this for our teachers. It's a menu. We teach our teachers. We give them that analysis to action form. They fill it out. And it's literally a menu. Second grade, decoding, sound partners. Third grade, comprehension, reciprocal teaching, etc. It's just a simple menu and it's easy to do. These are good ones. There are others. I have wrote the code up there for phonemic awareness. I also have for older kids, phonological awareness. This right here, Interventions for All, phonological awareness by ZGONC. Again, if I talk about it, it's got to be cheap, easy, and because it doesn't matter how research-based it is. If it ain't cheap, it ain't easy, it ain't going to happen. You can get this for like 20, 30 bucks at Amazon. It's a really good intervention. It's scripted. It basically has a bunch of lessons in it. Just follow it along. Really simple. So this is a good one to use. The Florida Center for Reading Research, by the way, Florida Center for Reading Research, FCRR.org. F as in Florida, CRR.org. You go there, and in fact, I'm going to show you that website in a second, and they have some intervention materials you can use. Sound Partners, well researched, great decoding intervention for kids as young as kindergarten, first, second grade. Older kids, this is written for, oh, by the way, Sound Partners is published by Sopris. The first author on it is, only author, Vadasy, Vadasy. Great, again, it's scripted. Just open the page. It's an easy lesson for the teachers to do. 20, 30 bucks on Amazon. Now, if you have older kids, you got to consider Rewards. Now, Rewards is by Anita Archer. It's a wonderful decoding intervention written explicitly for kids 4th grade and above. It's a wonderful tool. If you got middle school, high school, it's a great tool. Now, this used to be 20, 30 bucks on Amazon, but it's quite popular, so now it's really expensive. I don't know how much it costs, the new one costs. So here's a hint. I go on Amazon and I buy the old version of it and the old student booklet, and you can still find them. Each one has a little student booklet. But again, this is just another like program. You turn to page 25 and tomorrow you're on page 26. And I can find older versions of it on Amazon for much, much less. And they're basically the same. There are some differences, but the differences are not really all that important. Read Naturally is a fluency intervention. You have to read naturally. The kids, listen to the tape and read with it. Fluency intervention, it's a fine one. Now, this one, reciprocal teaching, I recommend really strongly. This woman, I don't know her. I wish I did. OCZKUS. Reciprocal teaching has been around since the 80s. It's been researched, published. We use it all the time. This woman, this woman is a genius. This version came out in, was it copyright? 2010? I don't think it's that old. That's not right. Doesn't matter. Whatever. This came out fairly recently. It's not that old. It's not 2010. Anyway, and this is the 3rd edition, I believe, 2nd edition. She was so smart. She wrote it down. She made a book out of it. It's a program. Page 1, page 2, step. It's really easy. Great comprehension intervention for kids. It's really, really cheap and easy. Yes, that's Lori, OCZKUS. Making Words, another nice one. Yep, absolutely.
Can you hold them up again?
Reciprocal teaching. Lori, OCZ. These are they're all in my matrix here as well. I showed you Read Naturally, which is a bit more expensive. And honestly, I don't know why people pay for fluency interventions. Just do repeated reading. Go to readworks.org, get a bunch of passages at the kids' instructional level, and do repeated reading for free. Rewards with Anita Archer. Coding intervention with older kids. Yeah, I can, but they're right here. All these interventions are in this matrix. I'm happy to email it to you, but they're all in this matrix as well. Sound Partners, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, Vadasy. And I like this one a lot, phonological awareness. This, I don't know, ZGONC. Published by Sopris. All of these are cheap. Spire is a good intervention. Spire is a decoding intervention primarily for younger kids. And it's a decoding intervention. It's a fine one. A little more expensive than the one I like, but okay, I can put authors in, sure. A little more expensive than I like, but certainly works really well. There's lots of them. The issue is not, are there interventions? The issue is, does the intervention address what the kid needs? Let me show you a website. I'll probably show you a couple of them real quickly. Oops, wrong one. Here's the National Center for Intensive Intervention. I think I showed you this last week to look at screening materials. They rate different screeners and et cetera. They also rate interventions. Click on academic intervention. This is just intensiveintervention.org. It's a wonderful website, intensiveintervention.org. Oops, tool chart, academic interventions. Okay, let's say I want to do just reading. Apply filter. It'll screen it. Okay, so now it'll rate the quality of the study design and results, quality of other indicators, intensity, additional research. So you want to see a full bubble. So they don't rate achieve intervention or burst reading very well. They rate early vocabulary connections, enhanced core reading instruction well. And again, look at these effect sizes. Remember I talked about that earlier, 0.5, 0.8, 0.2. These are moderate. That one's pretty good, moderate. So this one, failure-free reading, they don't rate very well, and it's got low effects. Fast forward for language, they rate it well, has a good effect. Fast forward, head sprout. Head sprout they don't rate it terribly well, but a good effect, 0.9. Think about rehearsal, which is the one I do research in. They rate it really well with, well, the only effect they report was this one, the 1.45. And then the rest are visual analysis, which they rate really well. I read, I'm sorry, they don't rate I read very well, and its effects aren't very good. Okay, I'm not gonna sit there and go through all these with you. Lexia, any other ones I wanna highlight? Oh, PACT is on here. I didn't know that, that's new. I just got a big grant to study PACT, and so I'm glad to see that here. They don't rate it terribly well though, do they? Oh, okay. Read 180, they actually rate Read 180, the research really well, but the effects are small, which is what I was saying all along. Read 180 is a fine intervention. You just get small effects for the amount of money it costs. Read naturally, they rate not very well, but decent effect, well, inconsistent effects. Recovery, anyway, so this is here for you to see. Sound Partners, they rate really well. With Sound Partners is well researched and good effects. Tutoring Buddy, all right. So it's intensiveintervention.org. You can go click on it. And by the way, if you want more information, I'm going to show you incremental rehearsal. You say, well, let's not use that one. Let's say you want to learn more about Sound Partners. Click on it. It takes you to this and describes it. It talks about who it's appropriate for, how much it costs, how much training it requires, what you need to run it, and the summary of the research. Really, really well done. This is really useful website. So that's a great one to look at. This chart is intensiveintervention.org. Go to intensiveintervention.org. I have not heard of unlocking the reading code. I've heard of road to code, I've heard of road to reading, I've heard of all those others, but I'm not familiar with that one. I'll look it up, I'll learn about it. Okay. So there's lots of great places to get intervention ideas. That's not the problem. The difficulty is making sure the intervention actually addresses what the kid needs. That's why I spent so much time on figuring out which bucket they go into, and then find the intervention that fills the bucket. We can do that, and then we know which kids need to dive into that bucket. Okay, so if I have a fourth grader who can't read, can't decode, I'm sorry, we're gonna get that kid rewards. And by the way, I didn't put high school on here, but basically middle school, high school looks like fourth and fifth grade. I'm gonna use rewards, I'm gonna use read naturally, and vocabulary skills and reciprocal teaching. Okay, there are lots of, but there are others as well. Explode the code is a good one. Yep, exactly. All right, so let me show you some data and walk through a couple more examples of it. And I want to spend at least a few minutes talking about intensifying interventions. By the way, there's probably more in your handout than we'll get to today. I did that on purpose, or I knew by design. That's okay. I want to show you a framework that you can use, and you can see the resources later. So there's a high school I worked with in Minnesota. I know it's a high school, and this group is primarily K3 because that's the dyslexia law, but still it's a good example. So 9th and 12th grade, 1,600 kids. Plus, I want to talk about high schoolers at least a little bit. We don't talk about it ever. 69% pass the state test for reading, which a lot of high schools would love that. That's not bad. It's not what we need it to be, but not bad. So they were doing a tier 2 intervention for 9th and 10th grade for the struggling readers, and it wasn't working. And they called us and said, you know, we want to try something different. Any ideas? So what they were doing was they do a book study. So the high schoolers took a remedial reading course. So for an hour a day, they had a course, an actual course, and it wasn't exactly an hour, but they All the kids read the same book in class, and then they had discussions around it. And that was their tier 2 intervention. Wasn't working very well. They didn't know what to do. Okay, well, so we showed them how to differentiate, like I just talked about. So in this school, they used the map. So roughly 800 kids in 9th and 10th grade, because we only worked on 9th and 10th. So of those, 28%, about 225 kids scored low on the map. Okay, good. So we've identified them as a struggling reader. We're not done. Map also, remember, means that they're probably low on comprehension. So I said, okay, so we're going to take those 225 kids, and only those 225, we're going to assess their reading fluency. So we showed the teachers how to do oral reading fluency, dibbles, and these two teachers literally laughed at us. They literally laughed and said, "You want us to pull every single kid one-on-one, have them read to us for a minute each? No way!" Like that was completely foreign to them. At the elementary school, we call that Tuesday, right? But to these teachers, that was a completely foreign idea. So we wanted to do something that they continue to do after we set this all up. So we got them a reading fluency measure. We got them the test of silent contextual reading fluency. Test of silent contextual reading fluency. It looks like this. The kids get a page, and it's a bunch of sentences with no punctuation, all capital letters, no spaces between the words. And as the kids read silently, they're supposed to put slashes between the words. So my grad students call this the slasher test, because TOSCRF doesn't work, and you don't want to say test of silent contextual reading fluency every time, so we call it the slasher test. So go home, put the slash between here. Stop now, put the slash between here. Help me ride fast, slash, slash, slash. Sit down, look around. You got that wrong. Okay. And the sentences get longer and harder. So it's a measure supposedly of reading fluency that the kids can complete in a large group. And is that reading fluency? I don't know. Silent reading fluency might be an oxymoron. So what we did is we took those kids and those kids, and we also gave them an oral reading fluency measure, and the correspondence was 90%. We did that with 4th and 5th graders too, and it's about 90%. So if they don't do well on the slasher test, there's a 90% chance they won't do well on a measure of oral reading fluency as well. So it seemed to work. So 225 kids low on the map. We took those 225 kids, gave them the slasher. Of those, 45 of them scored low, about 100 kids. So that means 125 kids with low in comprehension but good fluency. Those 125 kids low in comprehension, good fluency, they were comprehension. Okay, those kids needed comprehension. 100 kids were low in comprehension and low in fluency. We pulled those 100 kids and did the word text subtest of the Woodcock-Johnson. I don't know how you measure decoding in a group. I just don't know how to do it. There may be a way, I don't know. So for those 100 kids, we did a one-on-one reading, decoding measure with them. We used the word text subtest of the Woodcock-Johnson. So 100 kids, 36 of them had good decoding. So we have 36 kids who are low in comprehension, low in fluency, but good decoding. Those 36 kids got a fluency intervention. Now, 65 kids were low in comprehension, low on fluency, and low in decoding. So those kids, oh no, yes, we're back in the PowerPoint. Can you not see this? Have you guys not been seeing this the whole time? Oh no. I'm sorry if that was the case. I thought I put it back on. Thank you for asking that. I thought I put it back on there. I'm sorry if I didn't. So you didn't see the slasher test. You didn't see this. Did you see this?
Oh,
No, I'm so sorry. I thought I switched it to new share. Anyway, so it looks like this. Go home, stop now, help me write fast, sit down, look around. And the kids put slashes between the words. All capital letters, no spaces, no punctuation. So 9th and 12th grade, 1,600 kids. We gave them all the map in 9th and 10th grade. 225 were low in map. It means they're low in comprehension. We give those kids the slasher test. 100 were low on slasher, so they're low on fluency. 125 then were low on comprehension, but good fluency. They got comprehension. Of those 100 kids, you pulled those, did the Woodcock-Johnson word attack subtest as a measure of decoding. Of those 100 kids, 36 did well in decoding. It's a test of silent contextual reading fluency. I can break into that real fast. It won't take long. Okay. So 136 kids had low comprehension, low fluency, but good decoding. So they got fluency. 65 kids were low in all three, so they got decoding. Now, I didn't go look at phonemic awareness. These kids are in 9th and 10th grade. If they don't have phonemic awareness by now, that's a really serious issue. As you probably already would know. So 65 kids got decoding. Now, a couple points about that. Number one, 65 kids in 9th and 10th grade, not kids identified with a disability, just 65 kids couldn't decode to a basic level in 9th and 10th grade. I find that so alarming. I don't find it surprising to see it all the time. So those kids got decoding, those kids got rewards, the fluency kids got read naturally, and the map kid, the comprehension kids got comprehension part of read 180. As I just mentioned, these are the rewards, the interventions. So we had a couple groups. We had 3 groups here. First of all, we had the control group. The control group got read 180. All the kids in the control group got read 180. Targeted got rewards, read naturally, or the comprehension part of read 180. And then we had a waitlist control group. Okay, so those 3. 20 minutes a day, 13 weeks, we did these small group interventions. And by the way, this was an hour. So what happened is the teacher would get the kids on the read naturally group started. And they that's pretty much, that can be largely independent. And then the read 180 part was largely independent. And so she would pull the small group and run rewards. And so it worked in an hour really well. And they rotated and did independent reading, and it was great. 20 minutes a day. Here's what we found. Now the slasher test has a mean of 100, standard deviation of 15, just like any achievement test. So the kids who got targeted intervention and the waitlist control, those kids got read 180. Both groups were right about a standard score of 90, 25th percentile, okay, when we started. After intervention, this group went up by over 8 age-based standard score points. This group went up by about, what, 5? 4.5. Okay. So this group, which by the way, still isn't bad. Let's see a nice jump there. It's not bad. That's an age-based standard score point. To see that big of a jump on average that quickly is pretty good. But these went up by 8, which is amazing. And that's a moderate and significant effect. But look at the map. 206, 211. Now the waitlist control group comes in, 210. So kids are struggling, but waitlist control. So these kids started a little lower targeting than the read 180 or the waitlist control. But by the end of the semester, 217, 11 RIT point increase. 1.4 and what, 2, 1.5 or so increase, significantly with large effect. Targeted intervention was more effective. We compared it to LLI. There's 3 groups here. Targeting it, comprehensive is LLI, level literacy intervention. And then tier 1 is just good readers who were good readers to begin with, and we didn't do anything with those kids. So our kids increased on 2nd grade by 1.33 words per minute per week, or 1.23 words per minute per week in 3rd grade. Grade LLI 1.07, 0.94, and tier 1 1.25, 1.03. So there was an effect. Our group grew, the targeted kids grew more than LLI and more than tier 1. So for these kids, the gap between good reader and struggling reader got smaller. But for LLI kids, they grew at a rate that was slower than tier 1. So for them, the gap got bigger. And then we did a meta-analysis of this. Again, effect size 0.8, 0.5, 0.2. 24 studies, K8, looking at small group interventions, 0.54 effect. But if they targeted the intervention, 14 studies did that, the effect size is 0.65. If they didn't, if they tried to do comprehension plus fluency plus decoding, all as one intervention, it was only a 0.33, almost twice as effective. Targeted intervention is more effective, and we use the analysis to action sheet to make that happen. You know, I think I'm going to move on. I have some more practice data in here, but the group seems to be getting it pretty well. So I'll just kind of, rather than do a practice, just kind of touch on a few real quickly, a couple reminders here. So assuming they're all low on MAP, you know, these kids here are all low on fluency as well. This is already in fluency, so look at the accuracy. I love this. This kid's 51 words a minute, but his accuracy is pretty good. 54 words a minute, his accuracy is pretty good. These 2 kids probably need fluency building. Whereas this kid here, 89%, or this kid here, 83%, even 90%, they probably need decoding because their accuracy is low as well. Okay, well, I'm not going to practice that. And here's another restatement of it. Remember, the closer to the cut point, the less confidence you have in the data. So these kids right at 93%, they decided to do another decoding assessment just to find out for sure. But these kids who are low in accuracy and low in fluency got decoding. These kids who are accurate but slow in fluency got fluency interventions. We group them and deliver the intervention. Okay, Now, we have about an hour left, a little less, 45 minutes or so, and I want to spend a little bit of time talking about really intensive interventions. But the law says you have to screen and identify kids. We talked about that and address their unique needs. And so I want to show you how to do that in tier 2, because very few schools do a good job of that. People have been asking questions as we go, so I'm kind of pausing here to make sure there's no other questions. People are asking questions as they go, so maybe I'll just keep moving on. So next, I want to talk about intensifying interventions. Now, I'm not going to do this to the level I'd like to. I would like to spend quite a bit of time on this. I probably won't need to, I probably won't be able to. So I just want to kind of show you the framework and give you a couple examples. All right, so don't worry about here where it says BEA. Don't worry about what that means. All I'm saying here is we have a group of kids and they were getting a tier 2 intervention. So here's the measure we use to monitor progress. Here's the number of weeks that we monitor progress, and here's the rate of growth. A good rate of growth is 1.5 to 2.0 words per minute per week. But you can see this kid here was, after 12 weeks, still going down. This kid here after 22 weeks of intervention, still going down. This kid after 10 weeks, still going way down. So all of these kids, with the exception of one, this kid started off low and was really quite low and stayed low, even though he was making good growth. These are all kids who are thinking, we need to accelerate their growth. They're not doing well. That will always happen. When you run a small group tier 2 intervention, you will always have kids for whom the intervention is not successful. That's because we have tier 3. The goal of tier 2 is efficiency. Help as many kids as you can by targeting the intervention to what their needs are. The goal of tier 3 is now to really dive in and see what their individual unique needs are. So we go from categorical to really individualized unique needs.
I was thinking about you.
You can't really do,
And talk to a special ed.
someone's microphone is on and I can't do it with the participants list. Here it is. I'm going to mute all of you again. Okay. So you can't really do the level of analysis I'm about to show you at tier 2. At tier 2, it's category of the problem. It's are they fluency, are they decoding, are they phonemic awareness, are they comprehension? But now we're really going to dive in. And I'm going to talk about this little guy here. I'll come back to him at the end maybe and not talk about him so much now. This little guy, I'll call him Lonnie, that wasn't his name. And he was referred to us, we were working with him in kindergarten, and we tried everything we could for this kid. And we finally figured out what he needed. And we used the framework I'm about to show you, and he turned out to be a real success story. I'll talk more about that later. Let's get that for time's sake. All right, so here's the framework I use to intensify interventions. This is from the National Center on Intensive Interventions, that website I showed you earlier, intensiveintervention.org. What they basically say is this: use a good tier 2 intervention protocol, a validated research-based one, deliver it with fidelity, monitor progress. If the kid does well, just keep doing it. If the kid doesn't do well, you collect additional diagnostic data and adapt the intervention, and they continue to monitor progress. This is what I want to talk about, diagnostic data. What type of data do we need to really figure out how we're going to modify the intervention to help that kid learn? And we do so like this. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for just a second. I want to see as many of you as I can. Close this out in the chat. Okay, so now I can see, I can only see a number of you right now, but do me a favor, just for this one demonstration, turn your camera back on. You don't have to have your microphone on, just your camera. If you don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, that's okay. But if you're willing to, please turn your camera back on. And I want you to put your hands together and put it up so the camera can see it. Put your hands together as if you are holding a golf club. Okay, make the golf grip. Perfect. Okay, you just did one of 3 things. You went, okay, or you went, I remember that, or you went, right? You just perfectly demonstrated how humans learn. I'm going to go back into the PowerPoint. I'm back in the PowerPoint now, so if you don't see it, please let me know. As humans learn, they follow these very specific phases. We start off, we're slow and inaccurate. That's those of you who went, I don't know what he's talking about. So what do? You actually, I mean, I did see people actually look. What are you doing? You're seeking a model. We'll come back to that in a second. You start off, you're slow and inaccurate. Our first task is to get you accurate. Once we get you accurate, then you're in the proficiency phase. Then we have to worry about, so you go from slow and inaccurate to accurate but slow. You can do it, but you really, really, really have to think about it. That's the kid that reads sound at a time. That's the kid that counts on his fingers for math. They can do it. They really, really, really have to think about it. That's slow, accurate but slow, and that's proficiency. That's the next phase. So you go from slow and inaccurate, then accurate but slow. Then what you can do with sufficient speed and accuracy, then you can generalize it. Teachers push back on the need for doing things with speed, with rapidly. And does it really matter? Well, no, it doesn't. What matters is automaticity. You can't generalize a skill until you can do it with automaticity. How do we measure automaticity? Speed. There's no other way to do it. So does speed really matter? No, but if the kids are going to be able to generalize it, they have to have it automatically, which means they have to be able to do it with sufficient speed. So we start off slow and inaccurate, get them accurate. Then they're accurate but slow, work on that through novel practice opportunities. So we get them accurate first with modeling, explicit instruction, then speed them up with lots of practice. Then they can generalize. Then they can use the information to solve problems. This is what we're all about, using information to solve problems, right? That's the goal of teaching and learning. The problem is, if they're down here, if they're functioning down here, they can't do that. Our task is to first get them here before they can do that. So we want to modeling explicit instruction to get them accurate. Until they're accurate, I don't care how fast they do it. Get them accurate first. Never let a kid practice something they can't do with at least 90% accuracy. Never let a kid practice something independently that they can't do at least 90% correct 90% of the time. So get them accurate first, 90%, then work on practice, get them faster. Then we can generalize and solve problems. That's the framework we use to intensify an intervention. For example, little guy getting repeated reading, find an intervention. Repeated reading is probably the most studied reading intervention that exists. It's in the name. I use readworks.org. I think I showed you that last time. Readworks.org. It's a free website, all kinds of free passages. And you can sort them by Lexile, by grade level, by type, by topic. It's great. So what I'll do for repeated reading is the kid reads once, a reading passage. It's called a cold read, and they graph it. And I usually do that in blue. We do it in blue. Words correct per minute. Then they do 2, 3, 4, even 5 practice reads. And then they do a hot read. And then the hot read they graph in red. It's repeated reading. It's common. It's been around forever. It's been commonly researched. Good. Yeah. Oh, you started reading partners? Oh my gosh, Terry, I want to hear more about that. But not right this minute. But oh, that's fantastic. I'm glad to hear it. So this little guy was getting repeated reading while research intervention, but it wasn't working. Now you can't see very well because of the scale. I'm sorry, but he wasn't accurate. Now I mentioned earlier 90% math facts, sight words, letter sounds, spelling. I want 90%. Connected text reading. I want that 93% again. So this kid was not reading 93% of the words correctly, with one exception. He said, stop. You're doing the wrong intervention. So we stopped and did duet reading, which I'll show you a video of later. We did duet reading, which focuses on accurately reading the words more accurately, get him accurate, and then switched back to his repeated reading and look at his rate of growth. So here he's doing repeated reading, wasn't working, get him accurate, switch back to repeated reading, and look at his rate of growth there compared to there. Different kids, same scenario. This poor little guy, he's reading really, it's not working very well at all, but look at this poor kid. He's reading like 80% of the words correctly. I'm like, you're torturing this kid. Stop. Do duet reading, get him accurate, which they did. Now switch back to repeated reading. Look at his rate of growth there. Whoops, compared to there. Get him accurate, rate of growth there compared to there. Same intervention, by the way. Third kid, different, same scenario. Poor little guy, not doing very well. He's not accurate. Let's get him accurate, which happened really quickly. Switch back to repeated reading and look at the effect it had on his reading growth. That's the level of analysis that we do in Tier 3. That's how we do intensifying interventions. These are the data who look more experimental. We publish this in reading and writing quarterly. So the entire learning process for analysis, I want you to think of 3 steps. They learn it in the first place, they remember it, or they generalize it. First they learn it, then they remember it, then they generalize it. The entire learning process can be broken down to that sequence. And our task then, if we do a tier 2 intervention that's not working, or I have a kid who's a severe, severe reading problem, I need to find out, is he learning it in the first place? If he does, is he remembering it? And if he does, can he generalize it? Where in that learning process is the breakdown occurring? And honestly, I've got a really involved way to study that and to look at it, but honestly, I ask the teachers a lot, and they get it right pretty much every single time. So the person doing the intervention, that's important. The person doing the intervention, I ask them this question. At the end of the lesson, can the kid do it? There's two answers to that. Yes, everything else is no. Sometimes that's a no. Inconsistently, that's a no. Depends, that's a no. It's either yes, everything else is a no. So when I teach it to them, and you'll see this, it's amazing how often you see this. I have an example of it, my little guy, Lonnie. We taught him the letter sounds. And at the end of the lesson, I'd hold it up and I'd say, I just taught him the sound. I taught him the letter T, let's say. And he learned the letter T. We did it, no problem. At the end, I hold it up and say, okay, what sound is this? And he looks at it and says, shh, like he has no idea. Like we just did it. A road to reading, a good intervention. At the end of their lessons, they give the kids 10 words that contain the letter sounds that they just taught them and see if they can read them. So if the kid can read 9 out of 10 of those words a lot, and 9 out of 10 words, they're learning it in the first place. If I teach it to them at the end, I show them the 10 words and they only read 7 of them right, they're not learning it in the first place. All right. So learning in the first place, yes or no? It's yes, everything else is a no. If they do learn it in the first place, does he or she remember it the next day? Again, yes, everything else is no. If that's the case, so yes, or sometimes that's a no. Inconsistently, that's a no. Depends, that's a no. If they remember in the first place but don't remember it the next day, then they're not remembering it. They're not retaining it. And lastly, if they remember it in the first place and if they learn it in the first place and they can remember it, can they apply it? And chances are, if they're learning it in the first place and they're not remembering, and they're if they're learning it in the first place and they're remembering it, chances are they're struggling to generalize it if they're having a reading problem. That's an easy sequence. Help them learn it in the first place, help them remember it, help them generalize it. And if the intervention's not going well, we simply find out where the breakdown's occurring. They don't learn it in the first place, or they learn it in the first place and don't remember it, or they learn it in the first place, don't remember it, learn it in the first place, remember it, but don't generalize it. Somebody else said they started repeated reading with their son. I'm just happy to hear that. That's awesome. If they're struggling to learn in the first place, I'm going to walk through these, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these. I wish I could spend more, but I'll give you some examples. We either change the protocol, change the intervention, or adapt the intervention. Change the intervention, adapt the intervention. So there's some ideas for each one of these. Struggling to learn in the first place? Well, change the intervention by picking a different target. Or modify the intervention. If they're retaining it, if they're not retaining it, maybe we change the intervention. Okay, so let's walk through these. Remembering, it's a framework for intensifying the intervention. The kids using a standardized intervention with good fidelity, monitoring progress. Not working, collect more diagnostic data. Learning it in the first place, remembering it, applying it. And then we decide to either adapt the intervention or modify the intervention or get a new one. All right, let's start with not learning it in the first place. Most of the time, I would argue not learning it in the first place, it's because you have the wrong intervention. Most of the time, not learning it in the first place is you're doing decoding and you're doing fluency, you should be doing decoding. So most of the time, not learning it in the first place, you got to back it up, as I say. You got to back it up. So if you're doing fluency, maybe you need to back up the decoding. Maybe you're doing decoding, you might need to back it up to phonemic awareness. Chances are you got the wrong target if they're not learning it in the first place. You have to back it up. So this isn't about math, but for math, sometimes that's an easier objective. But even so, you're doing, word problems, and you should be doing single-digit multiplication. But even within the domain, so let's say you're doing repeated reading, and you're doing read naturally. Read naturally. Repeated reading is so easy to look at the data. And let's say in this example that this is a 3.0, and the kid's not doing well. They're not learning it in the first place, so you got to back up to maybe a 2.5 or a 2.0. You know what? I'm not. Yeah, I will show you. This will only take a second. Okay. So let's say we're doing repeated reading. So the cold read, we're going to do day 1, cold read, hot read, day 2, cold read, hot read, etc. So day 1, let's say they read 22, and then they went up to 24, and then they read 25, and then they read 26, and then they read 28, and then they read 35, and then they read 29, and they read 32. Okay, 33, close enough. All right, so let me graph that. Oh, shoot. Okay, so that's all right. I was gonna make it red and um, blue and red, but that's okay. This is cold read, hot read, day 1, cold read, hot read, day 2, cold read, hot read, day 3, cold read, hot read, day 4. Okay. Now, let's compare that to a different kid. I'm making these data up, but this is not unusual. I'm about to show you. Okay, let's compare these two kids. So I'm sorry the graph isn't color coded, but here's cold read, hot read, etc. Here's cold read, hot read, cold read, hot read. This is what you should see in repeated reading. You see a nice big jump from cold to hot read. This kid, you don't see a jump from cold to hot read hardly at all. So for this kid, the intervention, he's not learning it in the first place because he's not seeing a big jump within the intervention session. He's not learning it in the first place. I should probably make this graphs a little bigger. But this kid, you see a nice big jump from cold read to hot read, but look at his cold reads. They're not going up. If he's learning it, the cold reads should be going up. So chances are, okay, this kid is not learning it in the first place because they're not seeing big jumps during the intervention session for repeated reading. This kid, we see big jumps, but his cold read's not going up, so he's not remembering it. So they need two different interventions. So for this kid, we're doing repeated reading, not learning it in the first place. We're probably using a reading level that's too hard. Or maybe we should be focusing on decoding. I don't know. So we have to assess his decoding skills and see if we need to back it up to decoding. Or are we doing 3.0 for repeated reading and we should be doing 2.0 or 2.5? So repeated reading, not learning it in the first place, we back it up. Let's do a new share. And within decoding, maybe we move back up. Maybe we're doing, diphthongs and digraph. Well, diphthongs, and we should be doing, letter sounds and digraphs. Maybe for phonemic awareness, we're doing manipulation, but the kid still needs to learn blending and segmenting. So we back it up. Usually, if they're not learning in the first place, we have to back it up. We have to do fluency, decoding rather than fluency, phonemic awareness rather than decoding, or maybe we do an easier decoding item, easier phonemic awareness item, or an easier reading level for the kid. So if they're not learning in the first place, usually we have to back it up. We can also do errorless and salient interventions. So lots of modeling. We do lots of modeling for the kid. So here's I don't know if this will work. Nope, I knew it wouldn't. Shoot. So I'm going to have to go to my YouTube channel. See if I showed you my YouTube channel last time or not. Okay, let's do this first. There it is. Hit the wrong one. Okay. Hopefully you see my YouTube channel right now. So here it's on my YouTube channel. I have a bunch of videos. And these are, I think I'm pretty sure I showed you this because I think I showed you Jane's video or something. So I'm going to scroll down here to show you this video down here. I'll probably wind up skipping through a large portion of it. This is called duet reading. I made mention of it earlier. We used to call it supported close, but then that got to mean something else. So we don't call it supported close anymore. We call it duet reading. So here's Dave Klingbeil, is now a professor at University of Wisconsin. And
He is Carmen. And what grade are you in, Carmen?
Second grade.
Okay. All right. So, first,
for time's sake, I'm going to explain it. So what he does first is the kid just reads a passage to you and you follow along and correct any errors the kid makes. So if they're reading and they make a mistake on a word, you say that word is, and point to it, just like you do error correction I showed you last week. That word is house. What word is it? House. Good. Now go back and read that sentence again. So she reads for a minute and David follows along, corrects errors. No need to watch that. I'm going to skip ahead here. Probably right about here, maybe.
And from found a map. It's
seashore.
seashore.
What's this word?
Seashore. Go. It. I
Okay.
want to do it again.
Okay. Now we are going to read together. I am going to read the first word. So, and then you will read the next word, was. And then we'll go back and forth reading every other word until the end of the passage. Do you have any questions? Okay, let's begin. I
Was
walking
down
the
road
and
found
a
map.
it
Was
neat.
I
Picked
it
up
to
see
where
it
would
take.
me.
Okay, let's stop there. Typically you would finish the entire passage, and then after that, let's try it again. This time, you read the first word, and I will read the second word.
I
Was
walking
down
the
road,
and
found
a
map.
it
Was
neat.
So the kid reads the passage. They're going to make a bunch of errors. You correct every error as soon as it happens. Then you read the passage together. You read the first word, the kid reads the second word, you read the third word, etc. Read the passage. Then you switch. Then the kid reads the first word, you read the second word, kid reads the third word, etc. And at the end of it, the kid reads the entire passage again, and you still correct errors. So the kid read the same passage 4 times, and every word is either read correctly or modeled, as many times as needed. So this is not, you'll notice this is an intervention designed to increase accuracy. This is an intervention for a kid who has good decoding skills. Fluency is their issue. But for whatever reason, when they go read it, they don't read it very accurately. So we need to make it errorless and salient. So we're not going to do repeated reading. We're going to do supported close. So in this case, kid reads it, correct errors, go back and forth, then switch, go back and forth again, kid reads it again. This helps them get more accurate in their reading. Now you'll notice it's not very prosodic reading. So I try and get the kids off this intervention as quickly as I can. And as soon as I can, I switch to what we call listening passage preview, which is a video here. I'm not going to take time to show it to you. This little guy's cute, little Jake. Basically, it's kind of the same idea, but now I'm going to have a passage and the kid's going to be there. And I'm going to read 2 sentences. And then the kid follows along and reads the exact same 2 sentences again. Then I read the next 2 sentences, kid reads the next 2 sentences. So it's, maybe I will show it real briefly, just jump to that part.
today helping me is
Jay.
Jay. Reading passage and sit down in a quiet first while you follow along silently in the book. Okay. Bob went. Oh, I read first. Okay. Bob went to a farm today.
Bob went to a farm today.
He got to see 5 animals.
Got to see 5 animals.
Okay. And like that until you get to the whole passage. But I recommend you do 2 sentences at a time. What we found is when the kids read 1 sentence like that, they can parrot it back without really paying attention to the sentence. But more than 2 sentences is too much modeling. So 2 sentences at a time. So read those first 2 sentences, the kid reads it, then you read the next 2 sentences, kid reads the next 2 sentences, and so on. Now you notice here, the reading is much more prosodic, right? Much better. So here it's a much better model of actual reading than what you see in duet reading. But these are for interventions for kids who are struggling with reading fluency, not learning it in the first place. And we're on the right target, so we focus on accuracy instead. Let's see. The second example is called listening passage preview. It's on my YouTube channel here, listening passage preview. Let me leave that open because we'll probably hit a couple more examples. Okay. Here's listening passage preview. Phrase drills, another approach. There's a video of that. Here's a little information about it. I'm not going to take time to show it to you, but phrase drill is an error correction procedure. So the kid reads, makes an error. You correct the error, then have him read that sentence with the error in it 3 times. There's a video of that on my YouTube channel. We'll come back to this in a few minutes. Okay, so struggling to learn in the first place. 90% of the time, you got to back it up. You got to pick an easier. I shouldn't use the word easier. It's not easier per se, but you got to back it up to do. You're doing fluency, but really the kid needs decoding, for example, or move up, making a decoding objective that's a little lower, like you're doing letter sounds. You should do letter sounds instead of digraphs or diphthongs. Like for repeated reading, you're doing a 3rd grade level, maybe you're doing 2nd grade level. Or build in lots of modeling to help the kids become more accurate. Now, what about the kids who learn it in the first place but don't remember it? And that's pretty common among kids with dyslexia. Learn it in the first place, don't remember it. So now we have a couple options. We can either pick an intervention that helps with that or modify the intervention. So I'm going to show you an intervention, and it's called incremental rehearsal. Highly recommend you try this. Developed by Jim Tucker, folding technique. It rehearses one new item at a time, but uses an instructional level with high opportunities to respond. Lots of practice. All right, so let me go back to my YouTube channel. Let's start with. I don't have a letter sound one on here, do I? Shoot. All right, let's do words.
I'm going to demonstrate incremental rehearsal, which is an intensive intervention used to teach words for struggling learners who failed to learn with other approaches. With this student, I'm going to teach 2 words, knock and slowly. And the words that I'm going to be using as known words are words that she already has in her vocabulary.
Oops. Okay, so she has 2 unknown words. All the rest of the words are words the kid knows. So you hold it up and they can tell you what it is within 2 seconds. Okay, that's really important that it actually be a good known. Then you rehearse it like this. Where'd she go? There she is.
Drum. Slowly. I'm going to teach you 2 new words that you don't know yet. This word is slowly. Repeat it, please. Slowly. Can you use it in a sentence? My turtle moves slowly. Perfect. What's this word?
So in that case, we're teaching words. So say this word is slowly. What word? Slowly. Good. Use it in a sentence. If the kid doesn't use it in the right sentence, and by the way, you're not going to get terribly complex sentences. If it's semantically correct, move on. If it's a letter sound, I would say this is the letter T. The letter T says t. What sound? Kid says t. Good. What's a word that starts with t? And the kid will say top or something like that. Okay. And then you start rehearsing it. Now, slowly is the unknown word. All the rest are knowns.
Word? Slowly. Long. Slowly. Long. Drum. Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball. Good. Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball. Them. Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball. Them. Call. Very good. Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball. Them. Call. Day. Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball. Them. Call. Day. 4. Okay, again. Slowly. Long. Drum. Ball. Them. Call. Day. 4. Hand. Good.
Okay. So she had 1 unknown and 8 known. That's a pretty good ratio to start with. 1 unknown, 8 known. And you show the first unknown, rehearse it and stuff. Then you show 1 known, unknown, 2 knowns, unknown, 3 knowns, unknown, 4 knowns, unknown, 5 knowns. until you get all the way through the whole set. Now, once you do that, you're just talking that word. So that word that you taught, you no longer have one unknown and 8 knowns. You have 9 knowns in your hand. You just taught that word. So to keep the ratio the same of 1 unknown to 8 known, you take out one of the previous unknowns, previous knowns, when you add in the next unknown, like she'll show you in just a second.
Okay, now I'm going to introduce a second word and take one known word out. This word is knock. Can you repeat it, please?
Knock.
Can you use it in a sentence?
I have to knock on the door to get in.
Good, perfect. Okay, what is this word?
Knock. Slowly. Knock. Slowly.
And
Long.
the process starts over again.
Knock.
Okay.
Slowly. Long. Drum. Knock.
Through
Slowly.
the whole thing.
Long. Drum.
Keeps adding a
Call.
known until she gets all the way through.
Knock. Slowly.
Right here.
Now call. Them. Call. Day. 4.
Very good.
That's all there is to it. Lisa's now, Lisa Aguilar is a professor at Indiana University, and Ellie Walsh is a school psychologist in Denver. So that's called incremental rehearsal, but honestly, it's on my YouTube channel, these videos, and we have it there if you're interested for math facts, spelling. I don't have letter sounds on there. I don't know why. I'll have to add a letter sound one, but there are tons of other interventions as well. But if you go to YouTube and search incremental rehearsal, there's lots and lots and lots of, oh my gosh, this one's been viewed 21,000 times. Lots and lots of video demonstrations. Oh, by the way, on my YouTube channel, I should show you this. There are 2 examples. Here is incremental rehearsal for math done virtually. We did Zoom, and I used a PowerPoint.
Patient facts.
Jump ahead. So see,
This one.
0,
I'm using a PowerPoint.
6,
Good.
Zoom.
This one.
32
8 times 4 is 32.
Excellent.
So that's a cool one. And then McKinsey does a much nicer video than I do. Hers are very professional looking. Does one using incremental rehearsal with a little girl. I think she did letter sounds. Yeah. So virtually with PowerPoint. Okay, so if you're in a virtual situation, you can still do it. So there's lots of examples on there that you can use. You can watch that. There's been lots of research by it. We compared it to 3 approaches. This is the blue is incremental rehearsal. The yellow is traditional drill and kill, all 100% unknown. And the red is an old approach called drill sandwich, which no one does anymore because it wasn't terribly effective. But you can see IR consistently led to the best retention in teaching words. And it's been studied 50 times, easy. Here's several studies by people looking at letter sounds with ELL kids, words with first graders, words with ELL kids, math facts, vocabulary words, you name it, it's been studied probably. So this is an intensive intervention. This is a kid for whom they're really struggling to remember it. They learn it in the first place, they don't remember it. So you teach a letter sound, but they don't remember it. So I'm gonna pull that kid and do IR with them to do the letter sounds, for example. Intensive intervention, learns it in the first place, but doesn't remember it. Repeated readings, let's come back to that. Let's look at this kid again. So remember I said this kid here is not learning it in the first place because he's not seeing big jumps within the lesson. 1 isn't too bad, but really, you should really see jumps that look more like this. This kid, you should see like a 20, 30 word jump. So you see that. But you'll notice this time, his cold reads don't go up. So he's learning it in the first place, but the next day doesn't remember it. So for that kid, we need to build in more repetition. If they're not remembering it, lots and lots of repetition. So repeated reading is great. And what we want to do is, let's say you do 1 cold read, 3 practice reads, and a hot read, add in more practice reads. 1 cold read, 5 practice reads. 1 cold read, 6 practice reads, and then a hot read. So add in more practice if they're not remembering it very well. Here's a script on how to do repeated reading, which I obviously will skip. You can do word sorts. Word sorts are great ways to practice decoding skills. So let's say I give the kids this I put this column of cards down, cat, bait, plate, and I do the first row for the kids. So I pick up a card and I say hat. Does hat sound like cat, plate, or bait? At. Sounds like this one. I'll put it there. Fate. Does fate sound like cat, plate, or bait? Sounds like plate and bait. I'm going to put it here because it looks like that. Train. Train sounds like a, bait, plate. I'll put it here because it looks like that. Then I give the kid this row and they fill it in. I say good, 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 correct as need to. If they get it right, I give them these 9 to sort on their own. If they learn it in the first place, but the next day they've forgotten it, add in more cards to sort. Give them 15 to sort. Give them 18 to sort. Okay, so lots of practice, building in lots of repetition. And then there's a couple other things we can do as quick modifications. There's something that we do called pocket words or pocket letter sounds or something like that, where we'll teach a kid the sounds or something, the letter sounds. Let's say I teach them 3 letter sounds that day or 3 words or something. And then I put that on a card, put on a little 3x5 card, and they put it in their pocket and carry it around. And people stop them in the hall throughout the day, ask them to pull it out and read it to us. Don't reteach it unless they get it wrong. It's a chance for them to recall what they learned. So if I say to the kid, I teach the kid CH and F, let's say. Okay, so I'm going to write down, F and CH. They're going to put it in their pocket. I walk up to them. Hey, how you doing? Hey, pocket words, pocket letters, pocket whatever you want to call it, pocket facts, pocket math. They pull it out and they have to look at it and say CH, F. If they get it wrong, reteach it. But the goal is for them to remember it. This is what we call recall practice effect. When I have some data to show you, which I won't show you, let them sort on their own before you demonstrate you want them. No. Always, 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 I do, we do, you do. So I'm going to model it first, then let the kid do it, and then with my help, and then on their own. So I pull it out and say, okay, kids, pocket word, pocket letters. They look at it and tell me it too. It's called based on recall practice effect. One of the best ways for kids to remember something is to ask them to recall it throughout the day. I have some data which I'll probably skip for time's sake, but that shows it really works. And so what I do is throughout the day, just walk up to them and pull them out and do that. Now, at the end of the day, before they leave for the day, you have to, as they walk out, they have to pull it out and show it to you. Pull it out and go before they leave for the end of the day. So it's important to do at the end of the day. And by the way, they come back in the next day. I'm gonna have these 2 cards ready, waiting for them when they walk in. Okay, remember these? And make sure they remember it first thing right away the next day. Pocket words, pocket facts, pocket whatever. You teach it to them. Put it in their pocket, carry it around throughout the day. You stop them in the hall, ask them what it is. They pull it out and remember it. So other ways you can build in repetition. I mentioned number of reads for repeated reads, more examples of word sorts. If you're doing what's called cover, copy, compare. If you don't know what that is, that's okay. You can go to YouTube and search it. Cover, copy, compare. So add in more items for them to practice, more practice sheets, more repetition if they're struggling to remember it. If they're struggling to remember it, shorter sessions more frequently is also might be the way to go. So instead of doing 1 20-minute session a day, do 2 10-minute sessions. Test for retention at the end of every day, start with a review. So again, I have some data, which I'm going to skip for time's sake, but basically all this says is if you same amount of time, so let's say it's an hour. Now, let's say it's an hour. If you do it, would that be 12 minutes a day, 30 minutes twice a week, or once a week for an hour, have the kids practice in a control group, you will see that they remember it best for daily. There is no difference basically between once a week and control group. Once a week doesn't do anything. You're much better off to do it shorter, more frequently. Do 10 minutes a day for all 5 days is much better than 50 minutes once a week. That's all that says. And this is the retrieval effect. These are data that show if you help kids, there's 2 options here, either studying it or testing it. So asking the kid throughout the day, pull your words out, what they say. If you give them more time to study it, we see more increase in retention in the short term, but lower increase in retention in the long term. If you have the kids practice recalling it, you see less retention in the short term, better retention in the long term. So if they're not learning it in the first place, which is a lot, happens a lot, back it up, make it easier. If they're learning it in the first place but don't remember it, then we've got several options. We do incremental rehearsal, pocket words, or add in more repetition to what you're already doing somehow. Okay, I'm doing this fairly quickly, as I said, that would happen. I'm going to wrap up here in just a minute. I'm not going to talk much about generalization. The reason being is this is rarely the case. Most of the kids who struggle with learning, they're either not learning it in the first place or not remembering it. This does happen though. So I'm going to just point you in a couple directions. First of all, concept maps. Concept maps are wonderful tools to help kids remember things and generalize them. Again, I'll point you in the direction of reciprocal teaching as a comprehension intervention. If you're interested in math, schema-based math instructions, a wonderful way to help kids generalize what they learn from math. But alternatively, just teach them how you want them to use it. So if a kid learns it, remembers it, but struggles to generalize it, then teach it how you want them to use it. So it's a letter sound, and they learn the letter sound, but then they go read it in a word and they can't do it, then always teach that letter sound within a word. Don't teach it in isolation, teach it within a word. So this is a bunch of information that just says that. So I'm gonna skip all this. This is teaching, we taught the kid the MP consonant and NG consonant blends by having, we taught them to read the word jump, and then they go read the word jump, hump, bump, blimp, whatever. And we saw that increased generalization. Then we taught it to them in the words, and then at the end of the intervention, we had the kid read 10 sentences that contained those MP blends in the word, in the sentence. And we saw that really increased generalization. All right, so what happens when you do all this? Well, let's take a look at those kids. Once we figured out struggling to learn it in the first place, struggling to remember it, struggling to generalize it, we modified the intervention, and look how much their intervention slopes, with one exception, changed. I talked earlier about screening. Now we're talking about diagnosing dyslexia. This kid right here, after 12 weeks of intervention, this was targeted to his individual skill, and this was individualized based on the framework I just showed you. And after 12 weeks, we're still not seeing growth. This kid has dyslexia. That's about, in my opinion, as accurate of a diagnosis as you're ever going to find. Even this kid, went from 0.9 to 1.06. That's still a concern, I want to see this. I want to see go from this to this. I want to see go from negative 0.6 to positive 0.55. I want to see nice big jumps. So this kid right here, I'm worried about. He's a pretty convincing argument for having a reading disability, because we did an intervention targeted to his need and then intensified it based on his diagnostic data, and we still didn't see growth. And we implemented it with fidelity. Someone made that point earlier. Got to make sure that's true, implementing it with fidelity. And now let's conclude with, come back to Lonnie. I just realized, I bet this video is not going to work. It didn't. All right. Let me see. Let me grab that video real fast. I'll show it to you quickly. Oh. There it is. Okay. So here's this little guy. We did incremental rehearsal with him. Letter sounds. He's in kindergarten. And we did letter sounds with this little guy, and he was not learning them. And it was not learning it in the first place. It really was. And so we tried incremental rehearsal, which was not the right intervention, and that didn't work. So now we're now using incremental rehearsal. Oh, by the way, with kindergartners, I only use 5 knowns. 8 knowns is too much to keep their attention. So with kindergartners, I oftentimes use 5 knowns. So we have a little guy, we're using 5 knowns, and I'm using pictures. Like I had to use pictures to have knowns. Now, so we would teach him the letter sound, like the letter H, and I'd show it to him at the end of it. I'd hold it up and say, okay, what sound is this? And the kid would look at it and say, G. You just did it, right? So we started thinking about struggling to learn it in the first place, struggling to remember it, struggling to generalize it. We decided he was not learning it in the first place. So fortunately, he had good phonemic awareness. So I gave him a picture of a hammer, and see the letter H up there with a hammer? And so now we're using that to make this errorless as we can, as easy as we can, to teach him that letter H. And we do it like this. Again, the sound's not great. I'm sorry about that. I'll walk with you.
diagnosis. Thank you, please. This is what? What's that picture? Yeah, good. What's this a picture of? Good. Good.
All I'm doing there is making sure he knows all the pictures. So I'll jump ahead a little bit.
Good. Good. Okay, now when I point to these, you tell me the name of the picture. Now let's do this one. What's this a picture of?
Hammer.
And it starts with, yes, H, hammer, says what? H says, what sound is that? And H says, yes, yeah, hammer. What sound does hammer start with? Good, very good. Okay, can you another word that starts with? Like, ha, very good. Okay, so H, hammer, says what? What sound? Good.
This
It does. Oh, you know what?
And of course, he wanted a sticker. Got him a sticker. Nothing's more important to a kindergarten.
Okay, here. We get a sticker for doing that part really well. Okay, sit down. We'll do more stickers. Every time we do one, we'll do a sticker, okay? So, what's it say? What's it start with? And what sound does it start with? Good. Okay, so H, hammer, says, good. What's this picture? Good. What does hammer start with? Good. 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 Very good. Good. Excellent. Good. 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 Very good. What's it start with? What is it? And it starts with? Good.
Okay, so we taught him the sounds. Now remember, this is a guy who, every time we tried this, at the end we hold the letter and he couldn't tell us the sound. So here we are now. I've just taught it to him with that, that approach.
What that says?
I'm showing the card, and he says,
Good. Very good.
he says, for the first time. For the first time since this kid started school, we taught him a letter sound. He knew at the end of the lesson. This is such an exciting story. He was in kindergarten. We tried his interventions, wasn't working. So he was referred for special ed testing. They tested him, found out he had an IQ of 68, and diagnosed him as intellectual disability. The IEP, at the IEP meeting, they talked to the mom and said all that, and the mom said, well, can he still, so we're gonna start special ed with him. And the mom said, well, can he still work with Dr. Burns and all that? That's working really well. And the principal said no, because the grant we had was only focusing on prevention, not special ed. But we would have kept working with the kid, but the correct answer was no. And so, so the mom thought about it and said, I wasn't at the meeting. Someone later told me she said this. She went like this and thought, you know what? No, you're not gonna take my little African-American kid, call him retarded, throw him in special ed and call it good. And that's what I was told she said, word for word. So we kept working with him. And it was so awesome. It was a lot of work, but by second grade, little Lonnie, who was supposedly cognitively impaired, was a grade level reader. It was fantastic. It took a lot of work, but we got there. Once you identify what their skill is and you identify learning it in the first place, remembering it, generalizing it, we can really have great success. Like Dr. Sue says, sometimes the questions are complicated, but the answers are simple. We'll stop there. I've got lots of books on this, on intervention and RTI. Welcome to look at those. Here's my email and my Twitter account. So you've been asking questions as we go. I hope they were all addressed. It's 1 o'clock, so we're out of time. But if you have other questions you think of later, please don't hesitate to email me. Please don't hesitate to tweet me or something as well. I'm usually pretty good about responding to email. If I don't respond the first time, just email me again. I will respond. I won't be offended. This has been really intense afternoon, really intense morning. We covered a lot. So if there's follow-up questions or conversations you want to have, I'd be happy to have them. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording now.
Thank you.